Okay. Thanks for coming, everyone. And I know several people have told me they'll be coming in kind of at later times, and there's some other events going on around campus, I know right now too. So it's a busy time of year. So thanks to everyone who took some time out of their day to show up today and participate and listen and hear what these great people have to say about all the fascinating work they're doing. So this is the book panel and discussion for Justice Lessons, System-Affected Scholars in the Future of Criminal Justice Transformation. So very excited about this. It's been a long time coming. The book came out technically in January, but excited to have this release here and see all my awesome friends that have traveled from all over the country to get here, or some friends that are already here. So good things. So with that, I suppose I should introduce myself. My name is Grant Tietjen. I'm an associate professor of criminal justice here at the University of Washington, Tacoma, in the School of Social Work and Criminal Justice. I call myself a criminologist or sociologist. It depends on what day it is and how I'm feeling. But but excited about this. This is, my focus of a lot of my work, my life's work, I would argue. I'm a system impacted or formerly incarcerated academic or scholar. So I'm really excited about this work and about discussing the organizations that have been formed and built by system impacted people through higher education around the country and around the world too. So with that, without further ado, I will introduce our Chancellor, Dr. Sheila Lange, who was kind enough to give the introduction to this event. I greatly appreciate that, and I will hand the microphone over to Dr. Lange.
Thank you so much. I have been the chancellor here now. It's been 4 years. It just seems like it just went by like that, so fast. So I'm really grateful to you, Dr. Tietjen, for inviting me to be part of this book launch today in this panel. I always say, as I look at our faculty and the work that they do, and I see some of them around here, I'm just in awe of the work that you do. And so I'm one of your biggest supporters. At UW-Tacoma, we think it's important that those who are closest to a problem be part of solving it. Insights of people with diverse lived experiences are critical if we are to achieve our mission of expanding access to education and prosperity for all. In the U.S., numerous roadblocks confront formerly incarcerated people who want to improve their lives. With a criminal record, it's difficult to find housing, get a job, or receive an education. But we know that accessing college, especially if you can start from inside the system or after release, can be an insurmountable challenge without a supportive community. For formerly incarcerated students, education can be the difference between successfully re-entering society or recidivism. It can also be an engine for prosperity that uplifts their families, our communities, and breaks the cycles that often trap people in the criminal legal system. This book is an inspiring history of system-affected individuals in the academy, and it proposes a theoretical framework for how those individuals have and will continue to change what we know about our educational systems and the criminal legal system. I'm truly grateful to have faculty, students, and staff here at UW-T who are willing to bring their lived experiences into the classroom, into their scholarship, and into our community. System-affected academics have been at the forefront of an international movement. Worldwide, formerly incarcerated scholars and students have built networks to transform both higher education and the field of criminal justice. And when I talk to prospective students about coming here, I always say, we do criminal justice in a different way here at UW-T with equity at the center of it. So it is not your grandmother's criminal justice program here at UW-T. Our scholars are transforming this university. Last year, we launched Husky Post-Prison Pathways, HP3 as we call it, in collaboration with our faculty leaders, our students, and community folks who brought their lived experience to the work. HP3 provides comprehensive, tailored help to students in their transitions from prison to college, and we want to be the model for how this can be done well, not just here in Washington, but in the world. And I think we have the scholars here at UW that can make that a reality. You'll hear more from Omari Amili, our HP3 director, later in the program. It's now my honor to turn the program back to Dr. Tietjen. And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Tietjen is an associate professor in the criminal justice program at the UW Tacoma School of Social Work and Criminal Justice. He has written and researched on convict criminology, mass incarceration, successful reentry, stigma management, and pathways to correctional and post-correctional education. He works closely with multiple system-affected academic organizations, including serving on the steering committee of our HP3 program, and as the vice chair of the American Society of Criminology's Division of Convict Criminology, which I learned from reading his book was the start of this work. Among his many publications, his new book, Justice Lessons, traces the history, positive impacts, and future promise of scholar activists who have had contact with the criminal legal system. He holds a PhD from the Department of Sociology at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and he has been such a great mentor, role model, and friend to many of our students, aspiring students, and our alumni here at UW. So we're very grateful for this work. I'm looking forward to hearing from our panelists today and learning even more. I think I learned a new term, those of us who have family members who are in the system, it was system impacted. So I was like, okay, there was a new term that I didn't know, so I'm going to refer to myself that way. So I thought I knew a little bit about the criminal legal system, and then because I've been a champion for this program here at UW and at my prior institution, I thought I knew a little bit, but I tell you, reading this book really opened my eyes to what I can, as chancellor, should be doing and could be doing even more than we are here at UW. So thank you for that, and I hope that other colleges and university presidents get to read this book and understand how they can support the work and transform our institutions. So thank you for the work, and here's Dr. Tietjen back.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Lynch. I greatly appreciate that. So jumping into the discussion, I will begin by presenting the book from my perspective. It's interesting as we read books how everybody sort of interprets a book in their own way. But this book, came from a lot of work I did over the years with formerly incarcerated scholars, academics, activists, and over a period of time, as I was going to more and more conferences, going to more and more events, learning gossip through the academic grapevine, I saw more and more groups being formed around the country, from coast to coast, and around the world too. In multiple countries, in Europe, we're now in South America, we're now in Australia, for example, just to give you, some examples. So I started to think about this, and some of the other scholars, that I work with or that I know, or we're also like writing about kind of transformative justice movements that were developing around the world, and then I began to think about, as far as where the idea for the book came from, this is a movement. This is perhaps a transformative movement, and I wanted to capture that moment, right? And all the work of the people that have built this movement, right? I mean, it's the voices of system-impacted people that are this scholarship, that are this theory, right? So jumping into that, but I just wanted to kind of give you a background of how I came to the idea for this book, and what it means to me. So a new movement, right? An all-embracing movement of system-affected academics. So just to set my clock here. We organize groups, in how I defined it, of activist scholars, of researchers, of students, of allies, of activists that work in universities and higher education adjacent social justice organizations around the world. So I wanted to capture, because there are people in groups, but there were also people that work closely affiliated with groups that also are system-impacted or system-affected scholars. And they also have a powerful impact on the movement. Sometimes they work with 3 or 4 different system-affected academic groups at a time. So I didn't want to discount or leave out the importance of independent actors and their importance here. So we engage in higher education and criminal legal system transformation, informed by our carceral lived experiences, right? Carceral is a fancy word for, related to prison or incarceration, right? Criminologists use it quite a bit. We're built and then led by a strong representation from historically oppressed groups, people of color, people with records of criminal conviction, ethnicity, non-cis sexual orientation, and many other intersectionally impacted people. And so we have a strong and expanding movement going on here, not just in the United States. I would argue a lot of it, maybe a large portion of it, I'll say, started here, but it's certainly grown and expanded beyond our borders into international discussions. I have colleagues that are were working or are still working down in Brazil right now, for example, building a system-affected academic group, working with universities down there. So just to give you some examples, and I think they're even moving into working in Argentina also. So it's constantly expanding, which is exciting. So defining the system-affected academic movement, I wanted to capture what it really was. And it refers to people who've been affected by the criminal legal system, and they're also involved in academia, maybe a faculty, maybe a scholar, a college instructor, a student, a graduate student. And the affected, the term I chose, the adjective affected, wasn't chose randomly. It was chose because it had it captured a broad meaning of acted upon, influenced. It was not chosen out of convenience, but a sense of the breadth of variation in experiences and interpretations that system-impacted, carceally impacted people describe in regards to how the criminal legal system interacts with their lives. So a system-affected academic member may have been formerly incarcerated. They may have been convicted of a crime but not incarcerated. They may have served time in jail or prison, felony or misdemeanor, for example, or be acquaintance contacted, have family members or loved ones who have been incarcerated too, for example. And that's has a powerful impact on people's lives too. And some of the most powerful members of the group are acquaintance contacted, SSA or SAA members. And so the movement refers, to the entirety of the impact of the actions of the cumulative SAA population, right? Groups and independent individuals. the actions, this is the actions of multiple organized groups of justice-involved individuals in academic roles, often, or activist academic roles, working towards justice and equality-focused societal change for other fellow system-affected people. And of course, it spills over and has impacts on other people outside of system-impacted people, but I wanted the focus of this book to be on that population. And in the book, I do use the term scholarvist sometimes, which Jennifer Ortiz over here introduced me to that term from some of her work. Green, if I'm not mistaken, was the scholar that coined that term, right? And I love that term, but a lot of us, we take our work, out to the streets, out to the communities, and we bring the communities back into our work also, right? So we try to build things with communities and have communities build things with us, so it's very involved, often a very involved form of work, which is exciting. So the argument. I assert, that an effective means to build support for both elimination of the social need for prisons and humanistic transformation of higher education is through the growing activist scholarship movement of system-affected academics. So we, as system-affected academics, our lived experience perspectives can provide missing insights needed to assist with this process. For example, this contained within this growing activist scholarship movement, there's a dynamic that could provide vital structural support, reciprocal changes that occur between individual system-affected academics and institutions of higher education they engage with. And also the power of insider perspectives, right? And I took a lot of the ideas, and how I conceptualized insider perspectives from the work of W.E.B. Du Bois, from The Souls of Black Folk. And the author used examples from his own life to elucidate and provide valuable context for concepts such as discrimination, racism, racial inequality. And the book, this book, will seek to use the lived experiences of myself and the scholars that I interviewed, in the same capacity as Du Bois's work, right? I feel like he was kind of one of the breakthrough, scholars that utilized and harnessed the power of this insider perspective in a very unique and creative way I don't think the sociological world or scholarly world had seen before his work. So very trailblazing work. And we need to acknowledge when people break through those barriers, right? So the conceptual process, just to demonstrate what this looks like, right? The components of the system-affected academic movement theory. First off, I'll start with the center to concepts. So insider perspectives will challenge the system. This is a reciprocal process, the back and forth arrows. So insider perspectives challenge the system, provide more organic and comprehensive perceptions. So the insider perspectives of system-affected academics. And then system-affected academic mentorship functions as a warehouse of collective knowledge and a generator of useful scholarship. So these, this is a reciprocal process that's constantly developing, that's constantly evolving. I'm fascinated with that. I'm researching that more. I keep trying to further, develop that, further study that. So there might be some more work coming about that. But and then this reciprocal process is fed by trauma-forged carceral experiences that equal greater reflexive abilities of scholars. And I used trauma-forged carceral experiences to purposefully that language, because I'm not trying to say that I went to prison and it was wonderful and it gave me all these gifts. Prison didn't help me. We, as system-affected academics in prison, helped ourselves, is what happened. And part of the discussion in my book is we worked as community. We formed our own study groups and so on. And some of the other scholars on this panel, maybe we'll talk about this too while incarcerated too. We formed our own, small academic or intellectual communities while we were incarcerated, for example, and worked with each other, right? So, and some of our skills, some of our abilities, some of the growth we experienced was forged by traumatic experiences that we had to live through, right? And that system, in fact, impacted or currently incarcerated people are living through right now, continually, to this day, right? So, and the end product is, the pro-social impacts of the system-affected academic movement, right? And of course, this is a concept. I try to further develop that in the book. So this is I don't fully develop this right here because I want you to buy the book, right? So you can read it, right? But I'll talk a little more about it. But yeah, so. Methods and demographics, just to kind of go over what the book, what my research was, what sort of, methodologies I used. I used semi-structured, in-depth interviews and autoethnography or life narratives and personal anecdotes, right? The semi-structured interviews is a form of qualitative research for those who are interested in the research methodology, interviewing people from around the world. This was during COVID when I was doing a lot of this work. So, I was doing a lot of it via Zoom, or almost all of it via Zoom, right? And then we used, a interview protocol, and we had some, wonderful conversations with system-impacted people from coast to coast and all around the world. And then autoethnography and life narratives and personal anecdotes. I kind of mixed all that together. Each chapter starts with an anecdote, but it's kind of mixed together with, I strove to keep it, anecdotal because I did want to just capture that personal experience. I wanted to break away from the high tower scholarship for a minute and give everybody a new, the real human perspective of what it's like to be a system-impacted person. It wasn't only me doing that, though, right? It was throughout the book is the voices of the people that I talked with, my colleagues and my friends, that are system-impacted from around the world, also bringing that voice to the conversation too. But I tried to keep it, anecdotal, but I can't help myself. Sometimes the scholar kind of bleeds through, and I was still trying to analyze. Sometimes I would catch myself doing that, a little bit. But so it's kind of a mix of those three concepts. Demographically, the book is, the population of people I interviewed, or a sample, is about 43% female, 47% male, 39% African American, Latinx, Chicana, Greek, Lebanese, Native American, and about 61% white. So just to give you some background, and the sample was about 46 people. So just to give you some of the basic numbers about what the book looked like. So, and then how was the book organized? How did I organize the system-affected academic movement? I wanted to capture, my interpretation of how the groups are organized. So at first, I looked at unaffiliated system-affected academic groups. Then I looked at university-affiliated system-affected academic groups. And then I also looked at broader university system-affected academic groups, and then independent SAA individuals. So some of the original and founding groups within the unaffiliated, but meaning not affiliated directly with a university, not on a campus. Like Husky's Post-Prison Pathways would be an affiliated group, is how I would define that, right? A university-affiliated group. So like, for example, convict criminology was one of the earlier unaffiliated system-affected academic groups, right? It developed in the late 90s. It was being discussed earlier than that, probably, but it came about from just a discussion of formerly incarcerated scholars and academics that met at a American Society of Criminology. This was long before I was involved with this group. In the late 90s, and they began having discussions, and they began to pull together a kind of a loosely affiliated network of people at first, and began having more conversations and working together and collaborating on scholarship together. And then they kind of pulled together into more of an organized group, but still somewhat more of a network. And then then we developed and grew over time, becoming the Division of Convict Criminology. I'm not going to go too far into that because I want my esteemed colleague, Dr. Ortiz, to tell us more about that. She is the chair of the Division of Convict Criminology. But just to give you a little background there, for example, then the Formerly Incarcerated College Graduates Network, also founded by Dr. Beasley in this room also, or one of the co-founders of it, right? And, for example, comes along. So we start seeing these more and more of these groups coming along, right? From prison cells to PhD, Stanley Andrews forms this group, which is, all of these groups are quite active. University-affiliated SAA groups. These are groups that I call, because of the breadth of these groups, the California School, because there's many, there's several. There's Project Rebound, which was started clear back in the 60s. And it's, I guess you could probably fit it within the Pathways type reentry group by John Irwin. John Irwin, a well-known criminologist, highly published. He's also formerly incarcerated. He's also, system impacted. All right, so. And that's part of his history. He was a big supporter of the formation of convict criminology. He was later in his career by that time, and he didn't take an active membership in it, but he supported the formation of it, and he helped give it the weight of his work and his name to help build it. And support the formerly incarcerated people that were trying to form the group. So just to give you some examples, and Project Rebound is still very alive and well, has expanded to, I believe, like 16, campuses. 20 now? Oh, man, wow. Okay, and that was just like 3 or 4 years ago when it was 16. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it's really growing in the California State University system, right? So which is, I think, the biggest university system in the world, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so they're doing a lot of amazing work, and so on. Then Underground Scholars, which Danny represents, formed or began the early phases of it in 2013, roughly. And is expanding throughout the UC system, the University of California system, and is growing. I don't know the exact number of how many campuses it is in the UC.
All of the 9 undergraduate campuses.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So all of them, all 9 undergraduate campuses. Wow. Thank you for that. Yeah. So so it's expanding drastically, and I won't go too far in that because don't want to overstep the wonderful presentations of our guests here. Rising Scholars then at California State University, for example, is another group, for example. And then the broader, university groups, you look like Formerly Incarcerated Stronger Together, FIST at Northeastern Illinois University, Transforming, Renewing, Achieving, Connecting at my home state of the University of Nebraska, Omaha. And then numerous independent SA individuals all across the country and around the world, too, that interviewed from coast to coast and internationally. Let's see. I'm going to check my time. Okay. So finding out that the door is open. Let's bring in the voices of the people, that are part of this work. That's what we're here for. That's what I'm here for. We see the influence of academic institutions on people with system contact, right? So there's a transformative pathway through collegiate attainment functions as a two-pronged experience. introducing carcerally impacted students to levers of empowerment, while at the same time presenting the diverse population with systemic biases at the same time, right? So we're dealing with multiple issues, going on, and a lot of us have wrote about, that people didn't just walk into universities and say, hey, we're here, and there was open arms and so on. Universities now accept us and work with us, and now there's many places that openly work with us and accept us, And so, but they had to fight in the early years of this movement for acceptance and a place and a voice, at the table of higher education, right? Or they had to hide. A lot of people didn't come out, didn't disclose their identities, right? And there's still many that do that, and it's a very complicated, self-disclosure is a very complicated issue too, and I want to emphasize that too in and of itself. People have many personal or sensitive reasons why they do or do not choose to do so. It's also attached to structures of privilege and these sorts of things, social structural issues, issues of intersectionality and so on. So I want to give recognition to that too. Although, it's through their hard work, their academic ability, and their good mentorship that several system-affected scholars have found their way through higher education to careers in academia and the professional sphere. The other part of the story is that because they found very little support from society, they had to forge their way through structural obstacles largely on their own, with the support of a few dedicated allies, right? So Carl, for example, says, and I hope to bring the voice to this conversation as an expert who has that PhD that is recognized in academia as well, that can say that this guy isn't just some crackpot former incarcerated defendant. He's got a degree, he's got experience, and maybe that'll be the difference between being taken seriously and just another guy with an axe to grind, right? Diego says, we're not changing anything by continuing to research the community because we're just researching the community. We're researching gang injunctions, we're researching these shootings, but how are we changing it? There's people in the neighborhood, activists and activists that I call them activists, scholar activists, organic intellectuals. They're actually fighting against the system of mass incarceration, where they're fighting against the system of policing, right? So Diego's, really emphasizing that this work needs to be more than just a line on a Vita, or a publication. He wants it to be involved in working directly with the community, with the people he came from. And there's a lot of emphasis amongst the people in this book of that they want to keep their work focused in their community and give back, but also build with their community, because that's who they are, that's where they came from, right? And they remember that, and it's very important to them. Looking at the journey of higher education, right? This is the first half of the transformative effect between system-affected individuals and institutions of higher education, being the effect of academic institutions, so universities, colleges, professional schools, on the system-affected academic, right? And so I write about, the transformative effect, of system-affected individuals, the effect of academic institutions on them, and then I write about the effect of them on academic institutions. So kind of a reciprocal process. And in regards to the impacts of SAA members, higher education provides the opportunity to flourish from a general life course and scholarly standpoint, right? While simultaneously perpetuating and dispersing prejudicial and marginalizing forces also. And a lot of people talk about that, and we have to discuss that, that people have experienced, oppression, have experienced structural inequality and intersectional impacts, within higher education too, and are actively working and even, right now working to overcome those barriers. And it's an issue amongst system-affected people, that often others don't see, right? In another paper I work on with another scholar, Daniel Cavish, who's system impacted, we talk about it's, status fragility. This idea of that system-affected people are often dealing with issues of that others aren't quite visible, that they're worried about within their professional career as an academic. Like, what if a misspoken word or a slight misstep or action or something like that is misinterpreted somehow? Because that person is system impacted, and people know that. Would that somehow be detrimental to their career in ways that it might not be detrimental to the careers of others because of slight or hidden or under, kind of hidden biases and so on. So there is that struggle, and that's an issue that's constantly discussed amongst system affected academics. So let's see. So building a prison, a prison to school pipeline, we're connected. So the second half then of the reciprocal transformative impact within the SAA movement is this population's social justice transformative influence on the university. And it's not a flawless or smooth process. It's got many stops and starts. There's steps forward. There's steps backwards. People. Universities, when working with system-affected people, it's the same way, too. It's not this smooth transition process or straight line, There's been, battles that have been fought and won. There's, been, struggles that have happened. There's been mistakes that have been made, on the parts of system-affected people and also on the parts of this, of the academic institutions, too. So it's a growing and learning process as we overcome these issues, right? All the while working to, overcome, incarceration. Many of us being, not all of us, but a lot of us, working as prison abolitionists too at the same time. So, we're using higher education as a foundation to build and further enact, abolitionist type work also. So we're working on many playing fields at once, I guess I'd like to say that. Sometimes the movement may change higher education through growing pains experienced during their establishment and their subsequent evolution, as the organizations develop and grow in their own ways. And often SAA groups and people have to engage. Much of this is an ongoing process in periods of reflexivity and introspection, where we need to regroup, think about what we're doing, and any good organization will do this, of course, but I just wanted to capture that SAA groups are constantly doing this. I've went through it with SAA groups that I've been part of as we kind of have to retrench or meet and kind of workshop what's our mission here? Are we living our mission, or do we need to refocus our work, or refocus our mission and somehow, and we've done that and sometimes and had some. Often we've had powerful, positive results. So Tomas, a directly impacted SAA member and student, explains how lived experience impacts scholarship, higher education, and the public. We see things in a different lens, Tomas says, so in a completely different lens. And so we can also put our lived experience part intertwined with some of the theories. So I think we're both educating the public, we're educating you and ourselves, but we're also scholars, in the sense that we are able to be at the same level as any other person who's in academia or even in an organizational field. So I think that's powerfully captures how the student explains and sees lived experience and how it impacts scholarship and higher education. So thinking about reaching the hearts and minds and eliminating the social need for incarceration. So issues such as frustration at the lack of representation in academia, being ignored by policymakers, and the marginalization of their research and scholarship in criminological and criminal justice academies were often mentioned as motivators for engaging with the SAA movement, right? Because, not every formerly incarcerated person that wants to go into academia gets involved with a SAA group, right? So some choose not to, but so of course the obvious question is, why do people want to get involved with this movement, right? And so we look at and try to capture some of this dynamic. So Vicki says, I'll say payoffs of like being a part of a group. And I can imagine that some of their motivators were like, a support system within higher ed, but also to have a resource, like a good information, because it's so hard to find good information about like, what's possible for us, what laws really allow or curtail or whatever. So that's another huge benefit, I think, And so Faith says, I think that it's my ultimate goal is to raise awareness from all aspects of it. Pete says, there's a whole generation of, I didn't want to name the specific group to protect Pete's anonymity, but so Pete says, there's a whole generation of SAA group members now coming after me now, and they're doing great work. They work hard and they're really bright, brilliant people. But yeah, some of them are they're a little more radical, or they're more not, I don't want to say radical in like a negative way. I just mean, it's a term of respect. But yeah, they have some different ideas, and I'm cool. I'm like, let's all work together. We can work, right? So. And there's been shifts, and the groups reflect shifting cultural norms, with just in the surrounding society, but also in regards to issues that surrounding criminal legal transformation, criminal legal reform, and so on, right? People were incarcerated at different periods of time if it had impact with the system. Some people were incarcerated during the war on drugs, for example. Others were, incarcerated, back in the, the 70s or the 80s, when there was, the war on drugs went on for a long time, but the different segments of it, I should say, different chapters of it. But nonetheless, you're seeing here this, this process of, how people are coming in contact with these groups, and why, what are the payoffs, what motivates them to want to reach out or to make contact with an SAA group. So the writing of the SAA movement, I wanted to capture what writing meant to us as scholars, because I think it's such a huge part of a lot of what scholars are working on, the activism, the how do we capture the work, the transformation, and so on, the concepts that we're trying to build, that we're trying to bring into criminology, to bring into policy tables around the country, around the world. How writing through our lived experience can create change. So the process of writing this book, I talk about, just from my own perspective, frames the struggle to humanize people who are system contacted, right? And so this is an intermingling of lived experience with increased academic knowledge, and moving further away from system contact, gaining new life experiences, and an influence of new engaged activist scholars. And I'm looking at my time here. I just want to make sure that I keep things moving along here. I will kind of just go to the introduction, the conclusion, the discussion here. In this idea, and I wanted to just give kind of a brief conclusion here, but of retroflexive transformation. So the system-affected academic movement is an attempt to deconstruct oppressive systems and to disengage from the traumatic and harmful impacts those systems have upon us as a system-impacted people. So further, many in the growing SAA campaign are seeking to change the system and our places in society into something intrinsically different, into a situation that resembles equal rights and liberation for system contacted people everywhere. Just a side note, I took this from Cressy's concept of retroflexive reformation, which states that formerly incarcerated people working to assist and help other struggling formerly incarcerated people succeed also realize positive benefits from their actions, exhibiting greater psychological well-being and reduced likelihood of relapsing into criminal behaviors and criminogenic attitudes, for example. But I saw a further development of that, as retroflexive transformation within the work of system-affected academics, right? I want to thank you for listening today, and And then I want to now move it on to our esteemed panelists. So with that, thank you. And also we'll take questions at the end of this, all the presentations too. So thank you. And now I will invite Dr. Jennifer Ortiz from the College of New Jersey, a longtime colleague of mine, and that I work with through the Division of Convict Criminology at the American Society of Criminology. So with that, I will pull up your PowerPoint.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, thank you to Grant, Chris, and everyone here who made this possible. Thank you to the great staff I see wandering around helping us. You know, we can't do anything without our staff, so I appreciate you all. I know how much work it takes to put together an event like this. So I'm Dr. Jennifer Ortiz, like Grant said. You can call me Jennifer. I am an associate professor of the College of New Jersey and chair of the American Society of Criminology's Division of Convict Criminology. And so what I'd like to do today is take you on a little trip through convict criminology. And I will say I was not there when it was founded. I just want to be clear. I think I was 11. I think I was 11 when convict criminology was founded. All right, so what is convict criminology? So convict criminology is a movement, right, a subfield within criminology in which we're trying to uplift the voices of the formerly incarcerated, right, by actually giving them seats at the table, right, like a really radical idea. And so we try to promote their research, right, get them involved, but also get them to understand how much power they have and the ability to create transformations. Right? And if you're interested in reading way more about this, one of the founders of convict criminology, Jeffrey Ian Ross, published a book last year called Intro to Convict Criminology. So, a history. 1938, Frank Tannenbaum. We claim him. He didn't know we existed. He was dead before we existed. But yes, Frank Tannenbaum. So I call him the original convict criminologist, right? He did a year. He was arrested and given a year for a misdemeanor to make an example out of him. And then he turned around and used his experience to write great pieces, right? He went on to get a PhD from Columbia and went on to teach. And his PhD was not in criminology, but he wrote largely about crime. 1970, John Irving, right, so comes along, also formerly incarcerated, and uses his experience to write a great book, The Felon, right? And he goes on to write other books, The Jail, using lived experience, right? 1988, the Journal of Prisoners on Prisons is founded at the University of Ottawa by 3 scholars there. It's still in operation today. It is a journal dedicated to publishing research that is written by currently and formerly incarcerated individuals. So individuals who are incarcerated can submit to the JPP, and they go through the same peer review process that anyone else would, and they get to share their views with the world, right? And so they get to talk to us about what's happening inside right now, right? And what's happening to them and what they're going through. So I'm working with a gentleman right now who's incarcerated in South Carolina who's serving life there, who created a program to help first-timers not be abused by the guards and by other people. And so he developed an ethnography class and had them do ethnographies of different parts of the prison. So I'm trying to see if we can do a special issue of all their ethnographies within this facility. 1997, the first panel of ex-convicts, that's what they call themselves, and that's what I will call them. They convene a panel, American Society of Criminology, and they come together to make the very clear point. You're talking about us without us. You're publishing on prisons and corrections and sentencing, and no one's bothering to ask the people who are directly going through the system. It launches a great conversation, and in 1998, Jeffrey Ian Ross and Stephen Richards come together and they coin the term convict criminology. And they start developing a book. And they start reaching out to formerly incarcerated people around the world to submit for this book. And in 2003, that book comes to fruition and they publish Convict Criminology, which becomes our primary text about convict criminology for like almost 20 years until he comes out with another one. I'm sorry, you were taking a picture of that, Chris? You got it? Okay. So, in terms of modern history, right, 2004, the first convict criminology course is taught inside prisons by Stephen Richards, right? which I should note Stephen Richards is formerly incarcerated, so it was pretty awesome that he got to be the one to teach the first course inside. 2007, Convict Criminology submits a bunch of papers to the Global Perspectives on Reentry Conference in Finland, and they happen to almost take over the conference. So most of the papers end up being convict criminology papers at this conference. So we take it international. And then in 2012, we take it even more international, and we get the first outside of the US convict criminology group. We get British convict criminology in 2012 with Rod Earl, Andreas Aresti, and Sasha Dark founding it. In 2012, we get the special issue of the JPP. So we have kind of adopted the JPP as our unofficial journal. We don't control it. They're completely independent, but they really have become like our division's journal. And so they published a special issue on the first 15 years of convict criminology. And in 2016, we go to Brazil, right? And so we have workshops set up in Brazil trying to bring together incarcerated people with institutions of higher education. Right. 2020, we decided to become a division. Now, this was a long debate for a long time. Do we become part of the machine we don't agree with? And then we realized we could, that like kind of needed to have that seat at the table. And it made us able to, for example, fundraise. We were not an organization that could fundraise because we had no bank account. We didn't really have anything. And so being a division gave us that. 2023, we get convict criminology in Italy, and actually Jeffrey Ross and Francesca Vianilla published a book in 2023 called The Future of Convict Criminology. In 2023, the JPP, we come out with Grant co-edited with two other scholars, Allison Cox and J. Renee Trumbley, to give us the 25 years of convict criminology, right? Reflecting on what has happened in the last 25 years that we've existed, and what do we want to do for the future, right? Where do we go from here? So that's my really quick kind of overview history of how we got here. But I want to talk to you about what it is we do. We believe in 3 pillars, but unlike academia, we choose activism as one of them. We don't believe that you can be apolitical. I know a lot of academics, oh, you're supposed to be neutral. Your research is supposed to be neutral. My existence is political, therefore my work is political, right? Having a record is a political identity, right, given to us by someone else. So we believe in doing research, right? So sharing our thoughts, right, promoting research, and then also mentoring the next generation. So one of the most important things for us is not our individual careers, it's about the legacy we leave behind. My undergrad mentor was a formerly incarcerated man of color. The first time I ever seen a man of color in front of the classroom, and yet a man of color who looked just like the men in my family, right, who had just been through the same things. And he taught me, once you make it up one rung up the ladder, you reach back and you grab somebody else. And so a big part of what we do in convict criminology is that mentorship. And then, of course, activism, right, in a whole host of ways. And I'll talk about that in a bit. But these are our 3 pillars. However, even though we've existed for 25 years, we face extreme marginalization within academia as a group for a whole host of reasons. The first is, in the beginning, our research was just biased. Well, these are just criminals complaining about their problems. They just, complaining about their punishment, right? But they didn't say the same thing to police officers who got PhDs and then wrote studies about police officers. Their research was not biased, but our research was inherently biased, right? Despite our full academic training. We're also excluded from academic discussions, even those about us. So ASC 2 years ago, the theme was 50 years of mass incarceration. Guess who wasn't on any of the panels? Convict criminology. We weren't invited to be on a single one of them. All right. Erasure from mainstream research. I actually have 2 undergrads who just built a 500-case statistical database. So we can statistically prove that criminology has chosen not to cite our research. So our students went and they analyzed the reference pages of all 500 articles and identified how many were convict criminologists. Oh, I should say the key term, lived experience. So we want to show how lived experience is co-opting our movement by trying to erase us in their research. So look for that very exciting paper I'm working on with Grant coming out, hopefully, next year. And then at the same time that they erase our research, they fetishize us, My husband's formerly incarcerated. He's not an academic, thank God. I just kid, I couldn't, you know what I mean? I love you all, but. My husband says that every time he walks into an academic space, he feels like they want to put him under a microscope and study him. Like he's not a person. Like he's this little freaky thing they're supposed to study in a lab, right? And he said, they just want to, can I interview you? Can I talk to you? He's like, can you just have a conversation with me like a person? Right? So they want us in their research. They don't want to recognize our research. And then, of course, there's the unwillingness to admit or hire people with criminal records, right? 72% of colleges asked, have you been convicted of a crime? Not a felony, a crime of any kind. I worked in Indiana for 8 years before I made it back to the East Coast. And we would ask people if they've ever been arrested for a crime. Not convicted, ever arrested. So even if you were wrongfully arrested, we could use that against you. And then if you checked yes, your application went to the chief of police to decide admission, not academics. They also had an unwillingness. I had one colleague, her only crime was perjury. They didn't want to hire her. 1 year sentence she got for perjury. She ended up serving time in a maximum security women's facility, and they didn't want to hire her. Never been in trouble besides that, right? So it's to that level that some institutions are just not willing to even give us a seat at the table, right? And then, of course, there's language policing, which I won't go on a rant about because I'll be here for the whole rest of this session. But we're the only group that academics tell us what it is we're allowed to call ourselves. The only group in academia that's not allowed to call themselves what they want to be called are us. So we've actually had scholars say, well, if you change the name convict, I'll support you. Why are you oppressing yourself with your name? As though we are the ones who treat convicts badly, right? And so we've had a lot of that, a lot of pushes to try to shut us down. There was an attempt by the American Society of Criminology's former president to paint us as an all-white institution and as an all-male institution, despite the fact that statistically, we are a predominantly female group, right? But there's been these attempts to kind of diminish our work, to make us seem unimportant, right? To attack us. And it's strategic. The stronger we grow, the stronger the attacks grow, right? Last year, we had 9 panels at the American Society of Criminology Conference, the most of any division. And we're relatively small, and that's scary to them, not to us, right? So there's a lot of attempts to marginalize us, right? To exclude us. And so we go out of our way to try to do the opposite. And so convict criminology, we are completely self-funded. We're not reliant on any grants or any people. It's for us, by us. And so we have convict criminology themed panels. Me and Grant established an early career travel scholarship. So every year, we give 2 $500 scholarships to formerly incarcerated individuals to come to the American Society of Criminology Conference. It's not a lot, but we're self-funded. We do it by ourselves. We've given out 8 so far. We'll give out the 9th and the 10th one this year. We have a formal mentorship program, so anyone who is formerly incarcerated, system impacted, from undergrad all the way through to a pre-tenure faculty can reach out to us, and we pair them with someone who's more advanced in the field, right? So if you're an assistant professor, you get paired with an associate or a full professor who also is system impacted, so they can help you navigate all of the treachery inside of academia, right? Like how do you have to, you have to relive your worst day every time you apply for a job. You have to relive your worst day every time you apply for college. If you've never been through that process, I can tell you right now, having to go to a courthouse to get paperwork from a case from 20 years ago, just so you can get a job, and then having to sit in a meeting with people and then relive every single detail of that day, right? Imagine how terrible that is, right? So it doesn't matter how separated you are from that conviction. It's following you into academia, right? And then our virtual research lab, which we hope to launch this year, will be a space where formerly incarcerated individuals and people who are members can come in. They can download databases. They can look for scholars that are working on similar research. So we know a lot of system impacted people, even if they're admitted to graduate programs, don't get the same support in the program. So some of the faculty will not work with them, right? Or they can't work with them because there's institutional restrictions that someone with a criminal record can't get money from the institution. So like in my PhD program, anyone who had a criminal record didn't receive full funding. And it was just kind of known. It didn't matter how good of a student they were, right? They would receive tuition only, where the other students got fellowships. And so we hope to change some of that. And then, of course, for me, I think my favorite thing to do is to look for all of the misinformation in academia. And so challenging whose knowledge is valid, right? So, for example, I tell people, if someone did 20 years in prison, you tell me they don't know a lot about prison, tell me they couldn't write a book about prison, but their knowledge is not valid because they don't have certain letters behind their name. I take issue with that because we are a country in which education is a privilege. If it was a right, I'd be okay with everyone having to have a PhD, but it's a privilege here. And so challenging that notion of whose knowledge is valid. Right. And then questioning academic truths. For example, I wrote a piece called Doxa is Dangerous. One of my areas is prison gangs. And so I wrote about how for about 20 years, everyone kept making the same claim about prison gangs. The first ever prison gang were the Gypsy Jokers, founded in the state of Washington. Except that a doctoral student about 8 years ago went and investigated that and actually did a study of the Gypsy Jokers and found out that that was not true. The Gypsy Jokers started as an outlaw motorcycle gang that transferred into prison. It didn't start as a prison gang. So we start looking, where did that come from? Camp in Camp, 1989. I even cited it in my dissertation, because that's what everybody said. I went and found the original source. They said the line, the Gypsy Jokers were the first prison gang, no citation, no reference, no evidence, nothing. They said it in a government report, and it became the official point forever and always. So I talk about the notion that we're just repeating everything over and over again, and we just keep saying it even if it's not true, right? We're not going back to investigate the actual truths. So that's in this, the International Handbook of Critical Gang Studies. And then, of course, advocating for removing the box. No one's getting a PhD to go to campus and commit crime. We could just go to campus and commit crime. We don't need the PhD to do it. You know what I mean? Why would I spend 7 years and 6 figures just to do crime? It makes no sense. So why are you asking me on your employment application if I have a record? And we also know that universities that have banned the box have actually seen crime go down. Duke University was one of the first major universities to ban the box of their admissions application, and their violent crime rate went down for the next 3 years on campus. I'm not saying we prevented the crime, but we didn't cause it, right? Crime went down after they admitted people onto campus. And so I see this as us resisting our marginalization, right? Fighting back in kind of any way we can against these systems, right? And I believe that those of us who, quote unquote, have made it, right? We've got these tenured kind of secure positions. We leverage our privilege, right? Or I like to say we weaponize our privilege, right? If you're messing with someone at another institution, I will come. I will be there. You let me know, right? One of our scholars, top 10 PhD program, right? Had his fellowship taken away because other students didn't want to be associated with the fellowship anymore, right? They almost kicked him out of a top 10 PhD program. Thankfully, that did not happen. But that's the type of marginalization, right? No, it doesn't matter how far removed you are from your record. It doesn't matter how much you work hard. There's still that obstacle, right? And there's judgments made about you based on that, right? So founding the division, right, as a way to uplift our work, but then also making political statements, right? A lot of our scholars are engaged in individual level activism, right, on their own. But as a group, we've just decided we're not going to sit around and be quiet, right? We're not going to take the academic position of doing nothing, right, of saying nothing. So we have released multiple policy statements. And we're also engaged in actual policy work, so a lot of our members are practitioners, so they're not academics traditionally. One of our scholars, Helen Skipper, runs the New York City Justice Peer Initiative, where people who are in the system from arrest through to reentry are assigned a formerly incarcerated peer to walk them through the process, right? So that you don't get railroaded by your public defender, right? So you understand the terms that are being spoken in court. She founded it by herself, got grants, and is now funded by the city of New York. And she's in all 5 boroughs and just got a grant from SAMHSA to expand to 3 rural counties in upstate New York, right? Formerly incarcerated woman, 22 years in prison, came out, has changed everything, and is just about getting ready to finish her master's degree. I think she takes her comps in June, right? So it's really about us resisting our marginalization. And for me, it's just about being unapologetic, right, in all these spaces, right? So this is what I said when they excluded us from the panel. I just went to the panel, and I just told them, you can't erase us. We're here. We've been in this space for 25 years. And then we set our table outside of the door where the presentation was happening, and we had 25 years of research on a table. So, well, if you want to talk about research, it's outside, right outside that door. Just go out there, right? And that's really what it is that we're doing in convict criminology, right? And then whenever we have a new member, we pull through resources. Who knows who in what state, right? Who knows people in different programs, trying to get some of our members out of more problematic states into more kind of friendly states. And so that's what we do, right? Doing everything we can, little by little, to try to combat everything. So Grant's right. We're fighting so many fronts that sometimes I'm tired. I'll say that. That's all I have for you all. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll turn it over to our next speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to just turn on my timer because I don't want to take up too much time. So yes, my name is Danny Murillo. I am the co-founder of Underground Scholars at the University of California, Berkeley, and I'm here to talk about our program. So I'll do a quick overview, history and evaluation of our program, and then talk about our 5 pillars, and then we'll leave the Q&A for the very, very end. So briefly, Underground Scholars, we currently exist at all 9 undergraduate campuses. So that's except for the University of California Law School and the University of California Medical School in San Francisco. And so we are part of the California public school system, which includes the California community colleges and the Cal States. And all 3 systems, right, or all 3 segments are providing access to education for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people, right? And so, and all 3 of them are supported by state funding, right? And make no mistake, though, this state funding did not come out of their kindness of their heart. We had to fight for it. So in 2013, when I was an undergraduate at UC Berkeley in my 2nd semester, I met 2 professors. I actually met them when I first started in this fall semester. And that's in the fall semester, they came up with the idea of creating a critical prison studies reading group. And I was, I took it upon myself to start recruiting people on campus. I just had a knack of finding people that might have been system impacted. Actually, the first person that I met that was formerly incarcerated, we were in a non-traditional student space. He was across the room, and I was like, this guy either is military or he's formerly incarcerated. And within 5 minutes of talking to each other, we both discovered that we spent a significant amount of time in solitary confinement. He spent 9 years, I spent 7 out of a 14-year sentence. And so we were 2 of the co-founders. In 2014, so out of this reading group came this idea of we were meeting every week, reading literature about prisons, all the way from the system of chattel slavery to mass incarceration. And as we kept meeting, we were saying, well, we're here meeting, talking about things that we already know. Like, what else can we do? And that's when the idea kind of surfaced, well, let's create a space for our formerly incarcerated people and system impacted. I'm not sure if we're the first one to come up with this idea of system impacted, but I do know, I remember when we were sitting at a table and I said that I want to make sure that we include family members and people that come from these communities, because I know for a fact that my mother was my longest cellmate. She did that 14-year sentence with me. So for us, it was important to include family members. And then there was a student, an undergraduate student who was just starting her first year at Cal, and her father had just got arrested when she started at Cal, and he was serving an 18-year sentence. He had just been sentenced, finally released. But, including her as part of the conversation was also important. So we started, meeting every, when we were meeting for our reading group, we would meet up to discuss, ways of establishing a program. In 2014, 2 of our co-founders that were also part of the ASUC student government discovered or found out that there was a grant available for student organizations to apply to. And it was a grant that comes out of student fees, and this money is controlled by the associated student body. And so the grant was of $135,000 for a student organization to launch an initiative, and that's how we came up with Underground Scholars Initiative. And we used that money to to rent space at Stiles Hall, which is a nonprofit that has been affiliated with UC Berkeley for almost over 100 years. Their mission now is to recruit Latinx, Black, and Native American students. So for us, it was like a perfect place to exist because most of our students come from those demographics. And so we started Underground Scholars. We got this $135,000. And then in 2016, Senator Lonnie Hancock, California State Senator Lonnie Hancock, was in her last year of serving as a senator. She was about to retire. She represents the Berkeley district. And through a conversation with the mayor of Berkeley, who was her husband, he introduced us to the senator. And in her, prior to retirement, she gave us a one-time line item of $500,000. And then that allowed us to become part of the university, right? Oh, you guys can get money. Welcome. But not when you're broke. Get out of here. And so now that we were able to get money, they made us part of the program. Now we are under the Division of Equity and Inclusion. And so then in 2019, we hired our current executive director, Azadeh Zarabi, who then, took it upon herself. Well, this was something that was already happening. Other student groups, Underground Scholars initiatives, were forming at other campuses, but there was no formal program. So when she got hired, she convened a statewide meeting, pulled up all the student leaders from across campuses from the UCs, and we met to talk about our statewide expansion. In 2020, we received a Mellon grant of like $2 million that allowed us to then start using that money to hire staff at other campuses. And along the way, in 2022, with our policy fellows, we led a successful campaign that now allows us, after being passed, we get $4 million every year. It gets divided, $4 million divided by 9 campuses at the University of California to support an Underground Scholars program. So our program, Berkeley Underground Scholars, our program model, it's a 5-pillar model. When we first started, it was recruitment, retention, and advocacy. As time has gone on, we added more pillars, which is wellness. And wellness was something that came up during COVID. And then career services, just something that we launched about 2 years ago. So recruitment in prisons and jails is done through the Incarcerated Scholars Program. Incarcerated Scholars Program, it is not an academic course program. It is just a student support service program. We offer, it's a program that's under my purview. I supervise our Incarcerated Scholars Program coordinator, who then recruits about 10 to 15 students on campus to work as interns, and they're the ones that correspond with our incarcerated students. And basically what we do is provide transcript analysis and academic guidance for folks for incarcerated people that are interested in transferring to the UC. And then we also provide, some folks might write, today I'm doing a research paper, so we'll print some research articles for them as well, right? And other resources. But it's strictly a student support service program, right? So we don't do pen pals, we don't, do, even if they send us gifts, we ask them not to send us anything like that, just keep it strictly professional, right, to a certain extent. Incarceration to college is it's our youth work. We're working with incarcerated youth in 3 counties, San Francisco, Alameda, and Contra Costa. And we're looking at expanding to other counties as well, currently in conversations to expand to Orange County and LA County. So it is a high school kind of how do I say it? It's a A through G high school credit, right? So students that are participating in this program that are incarcerated are completing their high school credits. And then while incarcerated, for the most part, they are now also offering community college courses. So once they finish, they can enroll into community college while incarcerated. Last year, we were able to get 6 incarcerated youth admitted into UC Berkeley, right? 5 of them are on campus. 1 of them is still incarcerated, but we are working with him to take classes while incarcerated. He's only taking 1 class. It's one of our colleagues, or one of our faculty advisors, who teaches an ethnic studies class. And what she does is that she'll teach the class in class and then zoom in. He'll be able to zoom in. But then the next week, she goes to the facility and does the lecture from the facility, and then the students on campus will zoom in, right? And so then we have Teach in Prison. Teach in Prison, it's more of a partnership with Underground Scholars. Teach in Prison existed before Underground Scholars was even an idea. They've been around probably since like 2010. And what they do adult basic education tutoring inside San Quentin State Prison. And then folks, once they complete their adult basic education, their GED or adult high school diploma, then they're allowed to enroll in the community college that's available in that facility. And then our on-campus, our community college recruitment is done through the Ambassador Program. It is a student leadership development program for formerly incarcerated system-impacted students in community college. It's a 10-month program where we facilitate a monthly workshop, and we also do monthly check-ins with our ambassadors. And then part of being an ambassador is that there are tasked with certain responsibilities, whether it's to do recruitment on campus, do tabling, pass out flyers about underground scholars, recruit more students into community college. Sometimes we ask them to go to I'm not sure if they do this out here in Washington, but our parole system, once you parole, like within 10 days, you have to go to a meeting, and it's like you're back on the prison yard. It'd be like 100 people that just got out of prison within 10 days. And then, they bring in all these different service providers. For the most part, it used to just be like warehouse jobs and service sector jobs. But now we have a presence there in these meetings where we're also sharing with them about education, right? Our transfer program is for students that are ready to transfer to the UC. We have a group of students, about 10 transfer coordinators that are working with the community college students, helping them with their application, making sure that they submit the best possible applications, making sure that that they answer the personal insight questions. There are 8 questions that the UC application gives you. One of question is that they select. The UC system selects one question, and then you can select from the other 7. But there are 3 questions within these questions that allow our students to really lean into their stories. And so we always encourage them to write on those 3 questions, right? Because there's an opportunity for them to talk about their experience of incarceration and how that transformed them and allows them to pursue education. And then our cross-enrollment program, that one specifically for community colleges that are in the Bay Area. Other UCs can also do the same thing, and I'm not sure if they're doing it, but what we do is we take students from Berkeley City College, Laney College, Merritt, Contra Costa. These are all community colleges within the Bay Area. And we support formerly incarcerated students or system-impacted students to take a class at UC Berkeley. We help them with their books. We give them a tutor, make sure that, that they're very well supported. And the classes that they take are also with our faculty advisors. So it's usually the history of policing in sociology, or an African American studies course and an ethnic studies course, which is the prison abolitions class. And then our retention work, we kind of do a lot of services for our students, but I will talk about, I think the 3 most important ones for me is, or at least not for me, but for our students, is for sure the campus partnerships, the Basic Needs Center, the Collegiate Recovery, NAVCAL, Stiles Hall. These are all spaces that support our students in one way or another. For instance, the Basic Needs Center offers emergency housing funds. They offer food stipends, or not food stipends. They support you with your SNAP benefits application. But they also have a food center, a food pantry that students are, and they have good food, actually, that students have access to. And then NAVCAL. NAVCAL was a program that was started by one of our students. Collectively, since its existence, all the students that have went through their program already have obtained almost $10 million in scholarships. And it's only been in existence maybe like about 5 to 6 years, right? NAVCAL, basically, it took what we started doing when we first started Underground Scholars. When someone first came to campus and we found out they were formerly incarcerated, we would walk them to all of the resource centers. We'd take them to the McNair office. We'd take them to these different research offices. And like, yo, this is a new student. He's going to be applying to your program. We don't do that no more because we have too many students. But NAVCAL does that now. One of our students said, you know what y'all are doing, we just have to turn it into a program. And that's exactly what he did. And now, like I said, most of folks that have been through that program collectively have gotten up to $10 million in scholarships. Again, and also another important part of our program is the stipends and the scholarships that we offer to our students, and the community space, right? The community, Berkeley, even though it's in the Bay Area, surrounded by communities that are impacted by incarceration, for a lot of people, it's still a foreign land, right? And so having that community for our people is very important to help them navigate the institution. And then also I would say the work study jobs, right? We offer work studies. And in our work studies, we also give our students the opportunity to suggest or kind of allow themselves to kind of grow in their role. So it's not like, yo, you got to go make me coffee, you got to go print some papers. We don't do none of that. We try to give our students responsibilities that are going to allow them to grow in these professional roles. And then we have our wellness pillar. Our wellness pillar came out of during the pandemic, right? Our previous associate director, Daniela Medina, she realized that a lot of our students, were going through a lot of, I was going through some stuff during the pandemic. It reminded me a lot of solitary confinement. And so, a lot of our students were being impacted, by the pandemic. And so she created the wellness pillar. It first started with the healing clinics. We partner with the Community Freedom Clinic, or Community Wellness Clinic out in Oakland, or Community Freedom Clinic, sorry. And they're out in Oakland, and they come into our space the last 4 weeks of the semester, and they offer non-traditional healing practices for our students. So we're doing physical therapy, we're doing sound bath, we're doing Reiki, we're doing acupuncture, cupping, smudging with sage. So we're doing, these things for our students the last 4 weeks of the semester, and it's a program that, this is definitely one of the most used resources that we have. Also, our Wellness Equity Fund, that was something that was also obtained by our students. They applied for a grant on 2 different occasions, I think for like a total of $180,000, and this was money that we were just giving to our students. And the cool thing about this was that I didn't control this fund. All I did was just look at the applications, but at the end of the day, the student leadership made the decision because they're the ones that got the money. So they made the decision about who would get, who gets, pretty much everybody that applied got the stipend though. But yeah, that was something that came out of our student organizing. And then we also do the wellness retreats. We just actually went like 2 weeks ago to Vichy Springs. That's actually Vichy Springs right there, but that was last year. And it's called Vichy's Hot Springs Resort. So they got these hot springs. They're not really hot, more like lukewarm. But they're like, you jump into these tubs and you feel like you're like in a tub full of like 7-Up, because like the water is just like carbonated, like just bubbling, right? We do some mud bath, and we do a little hike up to a river, to a waterfall. But it's just, that day, we encourage our students not to bring any homework, just a day just to relax and just to chill. And then we also have our men's and women's healing circle. For our men's healing circle, it's to focus on patriarchy and hypermasculinity, and trying to unlearn and learn new ways of being in spaces with other folks. And then the women's healing circle is a lot of mostly somatic healing practices that they engage in the women's healing circles. And then shape our advocacy work. We actually, we were born on advocacy or on activism, right? We had to advocate for ourselves at Berkeley to get space. And so for us, advocacy was one of our first pillars, because, we truly believe that as formerly incarcerated people in higher education, not only is it our responsibility to change the narrative through our research, but also change policy through our advocacy. And some of the things that we advocate for our students on an individual basis, but we also do statewide advocacy, right? So some of those examples, for individual advocacy, for a very long time, we would always have to talk to probation officers to allow students to be transferred from one county to another, right? And we were doing that for, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, I don't know how long. And then I think it was in 2020, 2021, we just got tired of it and said, you know what, let's just create a bill. And so we pushed a bill that if you were getting out of prison, or you were already out of prison and you were on parole, if you had an academic opportunity in another county, a housing opportunity in another county, a family reunification in another county, and then the last one was, I forgot what the last one is. But any of those 4 things was an automatic transfer of your parole from one county to the next. Right? And that was something that came out of our experiences doing individual advocacy. We're like, let's just stop that and let's just create a bill, and it got passed, right? Another bill that we passed was during the pandemic. I was writing a report the possibility report, looking at the experiences of formerly incarcerated students in California. And as I was circulating this, my report with other folks to kind of edit it or take a look at it, someone mentioned, hey, what about incarcerated students, right? And our concern was that during the pandemic, there was a switch to going back to correspondence, right? And packets and submitting your work through mail. And so for us, we created a bill, SB 416, the Incarcerated Student Bill of Rights, that made it a mandatory that only public institutions can provide academic courses in California state prisons. For-profit colleges cannot. And face-to-face is always the priority. Second would be, kind of like a Zoom type of thing. And then last would be the correspondence, right? But that was a bill that we passed collectively, Project Rebound, Rising Scholars, Underground Scholars, and other higher education champions. And so then we also have our policy fellowship, which is a year-long policy fellowship program. This is statewide for all of our underground scholars, and is facilitated by our executive director, pretty much just teaching folks from how to create a bill to how to get it passed to how to get it implemented. And then as they're learning, this policy advocacy, we also partner, our policy fellows will partner with an organization or a campaign that's leading or pushing a bill that aligns with our mission and our values, right? And so what we do is we co-sponsor these bills, and our policy fellow would be like the lead point person on that bill. And then our last pillar is our career readiness pillar. We really started it in 2023. We've been in existence almost 10 years, and so we have a lot of students that have graduated and are graduating and will continue to graduate, so we really want to be intentional on how to support them prior to graduation, right? So we came up with the Emerging Professionals Program, which is specifically targeting our graduating seniors, and making sure that, through this program, we partner with an organization in the Bay Area that's focused on providing career service opportunities for non-traditional students, right? And it's a program, it's a nonprofit that started by a UC Berkeley graduate or alumni. And so when she created this program, she was actually attending our graduation, and she realized that a lot of our students were, they were happy to graduate, but they were also talking about like, what am I gonna do next? And then she came up with this idea of creating Represented, which is a program that helps non-traditional students prepare them for their career. And so we partner with the Emerging Professionals Program, making sure that our students leave out of that program with an updated CV, an updated resume. We partner them with a mentor in the field that they want to get into. We make sure that they get access to different career fields and also networking opportunities. And then part of that is also our community partners, right? Again, our community partners play a big role in creating these opportunities for our students as well. A lot of our students end up, taking roles with some of our community partners. We also do the career and grad school advising, and then our pre-law cohort, which was started by one of our students who was a prison lawyer in prison, sued California Department of Corrections multiple times, was admitted while he was in prison, and then came to Berkeley and is now at Columbia Law School on a full ride. And so our pre-law cohort, a lot of our students either are pre-law or law school, sociology, and public policy and social welfare are like the major grad school programs that our students are pursuing. So that's pretty much our underground scholars 5-pillar program model. And these are just some takeaways, right? I think, for folks that are interested in starting programs, I think one thing that I want to prioritize is, make sure that you include people with lived experience as staff, right? But not just include them, but also give them the professional and leadership development that they're going to need. A lot of times what happens is that we fetishize formerly incarcerated people, like, let's put you in the leadership role, but we never give them the training and the professional development, and then when they burn out, we're like, what happened? Because we didn't invest in them. Thank you. And then I can share this with y'all, so y'all can get access to the resources. So I'll share it with y'all. And then thank you. And that's my contact. And that's it. Thank you.
So
So for those that don't know me, Chris Beasley, Associate Professor in Social Sciences here at the University of Washington, Tacoma. Also on the steering committee for Husky Post-Prison Pathways, co-founded that along with formerly incarcerated students and directly impacted staff and community members. Serve as the faculty advisor for Husky Post-Prison Pathways. And the focus of my scholarship is mostly on the personal and social transformation, developing theories and practices for fostering both of those two things, both of those grounded in boundless possibilities. A little bit of my background: grew up as a poor and gay kid in Southern Illinois. It's sort of how I think about myself growing up. Saw a few possibilities in my life other than factory work, and immediately, anytime I gravitated toward one, seemed to be extinguished right in front of my eyes. So I really didn't see much of other than factory work. Had little sense of where and how I could find purpose, respect, and self-respect, some things that I think of as foundational psychosocial needs that people have. But I found those kind of things through what some people might label deviance and involvement in the drug culture, especially in drug manufacturing scene, where some of my intellectual abilities were sort of respected and sort of welcomed, whereas in school I had just the opposite effect, where I was told by a principal one time that I was too smart for my own good. So much different experience in the communities that I found myself in. Had repeated incarcerations beginning at 17, and so I ended up finding myself in prison sort of at the end of that journey, part of my journey. Later, found my way into college. I was actually fortunate enough to have an uncle who sort of suggested college as a way of trying to get some things going. Before I went in, I had a good factory job and was involved in sort of the meth making scene, so it sort of have this respect and sort of had a social status, if you would, and was just trying to get something going in my life again. In undergrad, I found meaning and purpose, mostly in marriage equality and sort of coming out movement. This date me a little bit, but I'd started school in 2001, still in some of the earlier days of coming out and before marriage was legal, but really found that I could parts of myself within that community. Found that my fullest self could be welcomed in some spaces, not welcomed in others, and that I could change those spaces so that I could be more welcomed in other spaces, and that I could have an influence in public policy. I actually had my first internship in undergrad where we did community organizing. I would gather interfaith groups together, sign petitions for marriage equality, and actually had a senator sign my petition, which was super exciting and really propelled me, I think. Found my way into a master's program eventually. In that master's program, connected with Roosevelt University's Life Skills Reentry program. Started to then learn about higher education in prison, learn about pathways after prison. Developed and tested, also in my master's program, I developed and tested a coming out storytelling intervention, still looking at sort of queer experiences, but really leaning into the coming out movement and storytelling and the impact that could have. After 7 years of expanding possibilities, finally realized that I could become a professor, set my sights on a PhD program, ended up in a PhD program. Sort of carrying mostly these queer experiences with me. You may sort of notice those, but I'll try to point back to them in some of the work that I and others have done. But up until this point, I had really found a disconnect between my identities, and I had largely, almost entirely held my formerly incarcerated identity, sort of had covered that up and sort of held that close to my vest. And I found that in queer spaces in particular, that identity, I didn't feel very comfortable with that identity coming forward because of sort of the value for the aesthetic, especially in gay male culture, and being in prison is not very aesthetically pleasing experience to bring into settings. And when I did start to interact with more with people in the carceral and post-carceral setting, there's often a hyper-masculinity in the community and homophobia in the community, and I always felt that I couldn't bring my queer self into those spaces. So I found that I had these two sort of identities that couldn't come together. Later on, I would bring those together as I thought about my unique contributions that I could offer to post-prison pathways work. When I was in a PhD program is when I really start to become inspired to do that work. I actually openly disclosed my identity when I was applying for the PhD program because I knew that it was that he did community engaged scholarship and that he used community-based participatory research, right? So I knew that he sort of valued people with lived experience, and so I brought that out in my application. And when I got into this lab, I realized that there were 2 other formerly imprisoned PhD students who were my lab mates. I still have not seen a single lab in the world where there were 3 formerly imprisoned people in the same research lab. So I feel like that was just like a time that was like it was meant to be. And I had this epiphany where, like, if there were 3 of us in this PhD lab who had been to prison, there must be a lot of other formerly incarcerated people who are college students or graduates out there in the world if 3 of us are in this PhD lab at one time. So it really inspired me and sort of set me on a journey. So some epiphanies that I had from my undergrad experiences and graduate experiences, one was that systems of power and influence were built by and could be changed by regular people. So that's something that I got out of some of my community psychology studies and sort of understanding of power and empowerment and systems and how they change, sort of learning about histories, but also like my queer organizing experience that I had. Also, as I mentioned, if 3 of us formerly incarcerated students ended up in the same lab, there must be more of us out there. So I started to build, I set a life's mission to build community with other formerly incarcerated students and graduates and to better understand and foster the development and movement toward possibilities. In grad school, developed a foundation in psychology and the practice of communities and organizations, learned about process and logic models, learned about mutual support systems as I was studying them and building relationships with people in Oxford House, learned about rules for radicals in some of the courses that I was taking, and learned about third order change, which I'll talk about here in a moment. So third order change is sort of a theory that I learned about and have developed a framework for since. And I won't go through this entire framework, don't have time for that today. But the crux of it is that it's an attempt to think about how do we create and nurture systems in which paradigms are more flexible and adaptable and sort of able to come up and sort of rise up through systems, right? So we're not sort of like stuck in the old status quo, as perhaps the same symptom might sort of carry through time. Different things in society might sort of cause that symptom at different periods of time. So we can't just keep looking at the same problem in the same way and expect that our solutions will continue to work because the causes of those symptoms might change over time. Third order change is an attempt to think about ways that we can foster that. So the model that I have built since grad school and use in my community work and continue to evolve on looks at sort of 3 different levels of fostering third order change through lived experience. So it's the idea of trying to sort of take folks who have developed their understanding of a problem or an opportunity outside of the traditional training, outside of the status quo, outside of the paradigm, and how do we sort of like take that talent and those perspectives and those knowledges and help them sort of like rise up, gain prominence, and start to have their actions sort of taken on by the system, if you will, start to change. When I think about the individual level in this model and what can we do to help individuals gain the disposition to the sort of socio-political disposition to have an impact on the world and belief in their ideas and their knowledges are valuable, et cetera, and develop different like skills and capacities to bring those knowledges to the world. Think about structural ways and what are the structural pieces to help people develop that capacity to bring their ideas to the forefront and have those ideas enacted. And then on the ideological level, how do we create cultures that value change and that value lived expertise and that sort of like, that help sort of create these structures and help create these individual level changes. So there's a few different ways that I've been working toward third order change, the community organizational development, and then public policy change. I won't go into each one of these in details, but just kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that I've had an honor to be involved in. One was a returning student support group. Another is the formerly incarcerated college graduates network, the Rise Up Conference, and Husky Post-Prison Pathways. These are the different communities that I've sort of co-developed and organizations that I've co-developed to help lived expertise gain traction, gain skills, gain disposition, have their ideas sort of presented to the world and adopted by the world. And then looking at doing policy change around fair chance education, Pell Grant reinstatement, criminal background check changes at the university, and then fair chance employment, sort of removing some of the barriers for people to gain some of those skills, to gain some of that disposition, and gain a role in social structures. I do want to say, though, that as I've done some of this work, that was not done in isolation. There are a lot of people that I know are missing here, but Danny and I and Dr. Ortiz, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. So I think about Project Rebound, John Irwin and Jason Bell in particular, College and Community Fellowship, Vivian Nixon in particular, Post-Prison Education Program, Ari Cohn in particular, Roosevelt Life Skills Program, David DeSabato in particular, Underground Scholars, Danny Murillo, who has worked alongside me as we've done these things, Just Leadership USA with Glenn Martin and Vivian Nixon. But I was able to co-create some of this work thanks to the shoulders that I stood on. All right, so there's two that I'll talk about the process in a little bit more detail with a timeline. The Returning Student Support Group and the formerly incarcerated college graduates network, and then Omari will talk a little bit more about Husky Post-Prison Pathways. A lot of my work started in grad school in 2009, developed a concept for a PhD fieldwork project in which we would sort of create some kind of post-prison mutual support pathways program. 2010, contracted with Roosevelt University for that fieldwork project, then developed a manual along with Roosevelt University, Roosevelt University's Life Skills program and their graduates. 2011, recruited my lab mates, some of the graduates of the Life Skills program and others via community outreach, started to get a little bit of a community going, developed a logic model, bylaws, and website. 2012, and then 2013 hit. I'm at the end of my grad school program, and I'm on the academic job market, and then I have to leave Chicago and go somewhere, and it never really took off. And when I look back at like what was the main obstacle at the time in 2013 is really finding other formerly incarcerated college students and graduates. Because like Danny mentioned, like we weren't exactly like out there like saying that we were formerly incarcerated. Like maybe you end up in the same space and you're talking and it comes out, but mostly we kept that X on our back covered up. But I think from lots of failures comes impact in the world. And so what I used, I used that as a moment to think about, like, what was the biggest challenge here, right? Finding other formerly incarcerated people with college degrees with which to sort of like make impact together. So what I decided to do is to build a national and international network of formerly incarcerated folks with college degrees, so that if anyone wanted to do that work anywhere in the world, they would have a network of people to tap into. And so that's kind of what the formerly incarcerated college graduates network is you could think of it like an alumni network without an institutional affiliation. And what does an alumni network do? Well, there's certain services that they provide in helping people connect with careers, helping people connect with one another so that they can enact change, et cetera. That started with the Facebook group in 2014, using the Returning Student Support Group as like the foundation for that Facebook group. And then I would do these Google News searches, and then I would create search alerts. And anytime a story came up of like prison and higher education, right? That's where we'd get all these like news alerts. And I'd say, oh, hey, there's a story about this dude, Danny Murillo, right? And then Danny probably knows this the next step. I would friend request you on Facebook, and he'd be like, I don't know who the hell this dude is, but I don't know, he accepted my friend request. He saw enough about me that he's one of this formerly incarcerated dude, so I'll accept his friend request. And I would just throw him into a Facebook group. At that time, you didn't even have to accept like being in a Facebook group. So you probably just found yourself in a Facebook group one day, and then you saw other people chatting in that group, and you're like, I don't know, seems like a cool space. Like, it's inspiring to see other people like doing this work. And then I would have this other search alert, and then I would Facebook friend request him, throw him in the group, find another person, find another person, find another person. Eventually it gets to a place where on my news feed, because I have I friended all these like formerly incarcerated people, I start to see like, oh, hey, my homie just graduated, da 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 da. So I would go friend request them, put them in the Facebook group, right? And then eventually it gets big enough and people start adding each other like to the group. And then it got to 500 people. And then I started to like identify like people around the country, different demographic characteristics, socioeconomic, sort of ethnicity, like gender, region and stuff. And we got together and formed a co-founders group and sort of went through strategic planning and became like an organization and stuff. So that's all in good hands now. Usually how I approach this kind of stuff is I don't like to create spaces for me to lead, but I like to sort of like band with others who like believe in something like cool and like help co-create that and then sort of like leave that space for people to lead. So came to UW-T in 2017. At the time, I was at a small liberal arts college, and they had told me, like, don't talk about being incarcerated. So I almost left academia, actually. I started to get sort of like discouraged and disillusioned with academia and my place in it. Oftentimes, like, didn't find my ideas sort of like valued in the same way, couldn't be myself in academic spaces. So almost left academia. But then I saw that UW-T was looking for somebody doing social justice work, educational access from a psychological perspective. I started to look at the mission, the vision, and the values, and I was like, well, maybe this is a place that like it might feel good in. And then I saw Omari's TAC talk, and Omari graduated as an undergrad. He got an undergrad degree, he got a master's degree, and for his master's program, he developed a pathways program for going from like prison to college. And he sort of had his talk online. I thought, well, this is a place that like values us enough where it's like people can be out, right? And we'll put that on our website and we'll value that. So I thought, well, this is a place that I could go and probably build in and feel at home there. And it's certainly been that way here. I came here in 2017. 2018 started building campus awareness and community. 2019 gathered together formerly incarcerated students and alumni and community members. We held our first summit along with other faculty and staff, et cetera. 2019. Testing, all right. Wore the battery out. 2019, formerly incarcerated Student Association. Students developed that. 20 to 22, developed a concept model for the Husky post-prison pathways and supported formerly incarcerated student leaders. 2020, should say also like 2021, Dr. Lang came in, right? Soon after that, 2023, we secured a formal funding for a formal program. 2024, developed a steering committee, hired a director, and sort of elaborated on the program model and launched. But that's kind of a little bit of the process through which Husky Post-Prison Pathways was built. And then Omari will talk a little bit more about Husky Post-Prison Pathways itself. I'm not going to talk through this this whole model here, but in Husky Post-Prison Pathways, part of the knowledge system that I've developed like through community and through scholarship combined is this possible selves framework, and we try to like incorporate that throughout Husky Post-Prison Pathways. But it's just trying to think about the ways in which incarcerated and formerly incarcerated folks' ideas about what's possible for us in the future can be constrained through our life experiences and through socio-cultural knowledge about people like us that we're exposed to, and the ways in which higher education and other things can expand those possibilities, lead us down different pathways in life, help us become sort of reach our fullest potential. But it's a model that kind of combines possible selves theory, schema theory, with some identity and learning theory, with self-actualization and self-fulfillment. The idea being that the end goal isn't desistance, right? It's a helpful byproduct, if you will, but the end goal is to help people reach their fullest potential, and by doing so, people will just be less likely to commit crime. All right, so just a little sort of closing note here. Some of the amazing ways in which I've been shaped by academia and then sort of reciprocally shaped academia are through some foundational college experiences and knowledge that I gained through community psychology and through queer organizing, developed models and frameworks for intentional action from that, applied community and academic knowledge to other challenges, so taking some of this knowledge, applying it to other areas, building community and having collective impact, and then developing theoretical and community-grounded models, curriculum, and training. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I recognize that we're about 2 hours in now, so I just want to invite everyone to stand up and stretch if you want to. If there's anybody who wants to move around a little bit, I just want to invite that right now. So I'll keep this a little bit brief. I know I was scheduled for 20 minutes, but I don't think I'll end up using the whole 20 minutes so we can get to the Q&A. But I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, who I am, because I feel like every time I share my experiences, it's important to know where I came from in order to see the value of where I am today and the work that I do. And then I'll get into a little bit about Husky post-prison pathways as well. I was intentional to make sure there wasn't a whole bunch of overlap with what Dr. Beasley was going to present, so I'm glad to see that it does line up that way. So my name is Omari Amili. I was born in Seattle, Washington in the mid-'80s, which when you live in predominantly black communities in the mid-'80s, it's a pretty rough time because that's when crack cocaine was introduced. So started out in a strong two-parent household, basic needs met, both parents working, everything good. But within like 5 years of my birth, the household had just seen a lot of things like domestic violence, financial problems, marital issues, and my parents ended up getting divorced, which created a pretty devastating circumstance for myself and my sisters. My dad made a conscious decision that he was not gonna work again because he didn't want to pay child support. So it wasn't that he wasn't qualified, that he wasn't able. He said, I'm checking out. And he literally opted out of participating in just being a normal member of society, somebody who's going to work, paying taxes and things like that. But at the same time, he didn't give up on being a parent for his kids, which was interesting because he wasn't in position to be a provider or a protector. So I would end up in situations where I'm panhandling, sleeping in cars, riding buses from one end of the route to the other to stay out of the rain, and it was just real rough for me and my sisters when we're with him. But he was a very smart man. He was a strong man, and he was a leader with the Black Panther Party in Portland, but it's just not quite the person who I got to interact with, because by the time I was born in the mid-'80s, all of his activism and things like that were replaced by addiction, you know? So my mom, she ended up marrying somebody who had addiction as well, so when I'm with her, it's just as bad. I'm living in crack houses, homeless shelters, dealing with things like drive-by shootings, drug busts, and didn't really have anyone to guide me and point me in the right direction. So my life of crime first started at the age of 9 years old. And it started out of necessity where I had to provide for myself, food, clothes, you know, things that 9-year-olds typically don't have to provide. And at the same time, I would also have to provide these things for my sisters sometimes. So it was real rough. I ended up, you know, going from like petty shoplifting and things like that to ultimately, by the time I'm about 16 years old, learning about some bank fraud schemes that were going on. And that's what landed me in prison, was bank fraud. I thought I had a really good run that turned my fortunes around, thought that I went from being this person who was stuck in poverty, dirt poor, to making a whole lot of money. And I thought that I was successful because I looked up to drug dealers, pimps, gang members, you know, things of that nature. So I thought I was the man, to be honest, and I thought it was gonna last forever. But little did I know, my path to success was actually a path to destruction. And by the time this caught up with me, I found out that I had a warrant for 30 felonies at one time. And when I found this out, I turned myself in. I hired a lawyer. He set up a warrant quash hearing, and I didn't want to live my life just looking over my shoulders, you know? So I had kids at the time, 2 kids at the time that I was incarcerated. I was still really young, though. I was only 21 years old, but I knew I needed to address this situation in order to move forward in life. So when I turned myself in, my lawyer was telling me that I'm looking at decades in prison for leading organized crime. I didn't fully understand that. It wasn't one of the 30 felonies I was charged with, but after sitting in the county jail for 8.5 months, I was told, your best way out of this situation, plead guilty as charged to all 30 felonies, and then they will not file the leading organized crime charge against you. And when my lawyer told me, my life was pretty much in his hands. So when he's telling me this is the best thing to do or else I'm gonna get decades, I did it and went from having no criminal history to 30 felony convictions, which just came along with a lot of collateral consequences. Even though this was my first time ever in jail, my background check was gonna print pages and pages and pages, and it was gonna look like I had been in and out of prison multiple times because they just see the number of convictions. So the prosecutors thought they destroyed my future at that time. The judge actually had several different options at my sentencing. He could have went with the prosecutor and gave me my maximum, which was 7 years for identity theft. Out of the 30 felonies, identity theft in the first degree was the highest one, carried the most time. There was one count of identity theft. So that made it where my maximum was 7 years in prison. But my lawyer fought and got me what's called a drug, I hate the word offender, but it's in the name, drug offender sentencing alternative. And that meant that instead of a 7-year sentence like the prosecutor was recommending, I ended up with a 6-year sentence where half was a prison sentence, half was probation, but if you mess up when you get out, that other 3 years turns into a prison sentence. And in the state of Washington, you only do half of your time on nonviolent crime. So the 3 years that was a prison sentence, it meant I only had to do 18 months. But I ended up doing 20 total because the county time, you don't quite get half. But for me, I see this as a major blessing, a second chance. I'm like, I was just being told I'm looking at decades, and I already did 8.5 months. So when I get my sentence, my release date is gonna be the very next calendar year. So I'm like, you are never going to see me incarcerated again. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I had been abandoned, neglected. I had experienced foster care, chronic instability, went to over 15 schools growing up, and I didn't want to do that to my kids. By me becoming incarcerated, I did the same exact thing to my kids that my parents had done to me, even though it looked different. Mine was crime and incarceration. With my parents, it was addiction. So did my time, got out, and turned my life around. But it was not easy to do. I first started looking for jobs. Like, if people aren't getting locked up, they're going to work, right? But I'm 23 years old with 30 felony convictions on my background, no work experience, no resume, no mentors, no programs, no role models. I released in 2008. It's a lot different than today, where there's so many nonprofits focused on reentry and things of that nature. I really had to find my own path. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. But I found a job at the Old Country Buffet, and that's what helped me realize that if I was going to stay out of prison, I couldn't have employment that was a poverty trap. To me, a minimum wage job where they're only gonna let you work like 12 hours a week and you have a family to take care of is a trap to go back to prison, because eventually there's gonna be some pressure I gotta feel that's gonna lead to crime, gonna lead to incarceration again. So that's when I recognized that in order to get a job or a career, something that I actually found meaningful and wanted to do, I would have to turn back to education, even though I had a horrible K-12 experience. I hated my teachers hated me. I first dropped out in the 6th grade. I was skipping school constantly in elementary school. Major gaps in my education, gaps that have still not been filled today. There's a lot of things that my peers were learning, and I was either absent or in the hallway or in another classroom or suspended, things of that nature. But when I got out of prison, I had a GED, and that allowed me to enroll at a local community college. That was all I needed for entry. I was lucky to earn my GED with those gaps in my education. I'm gonna be honest, I never should have earned it. There were a lot of questions on that test that I didn't know, and I guessed, and somehow guessed enough right to where I earned my GED. Because when I enrolled at the local community college, I'm starting out by learning like the order of operations, the PEMDAS and things like that, stuff you have to know to get your GED. I'm learning that at Pierce College in Lakewood. And I started in a really low math class, but every time I just got a good grade in an assignment or passed a test, my confidence and self-esteem was boosted. I was able to see myself not as somebody who's fresh out of prison, not somebody who's a convict or a felon, but as a college student. And I can talk about myself in positive ways about the progress that I'm making in life instead of just what I had been through that, up until that point. So being able to reclaim my narrative and reframe my life in a positive way was huge for my identity. and it worked wonders in my life. I became a role model to people in my family. I remember my mom just bragging about me, the fact that I hadn't accomplished anything yet. I hadn't earned a degree or anything, but she was bragging about the fact her son was a college student and he was gonna be a drug and alcohol counselor eventually, and she was just so proud of me. And my mom and my dad, they both got to see me walk across the stage and graduate and earn my associate's degree. Became the first person in my family to ever do that. First person out of my household to ever do anything of that nature. And I learned that I didn't have to stop with an associate's degree. So after I earned my associates at Pierce College, I was able to transfer here to UW-T, where my transformation just continued. You know, I worked in events and conference services. I worked in the advancement office. I worked in the financial aid office here. And these were the first jobs that were meaningful to me. That old country buffet job, once again, poverty trap. These jobs didn't pay a lot more money, but I'm learning transferable skills, things that might help me in the future. You know, I'm learning skill sets. I'm learning how to even be an employee, how to show up to work and things of that nature. And that journey from prison to college, it really gave me and my family new opportunities. My kids didn't have to worry about going to 15 different schools like I did. They had stability. They actually were able to know the same friends from elementary school all the way to high school, right? So I was trying to do things not only for myself, but for my children, and I was able to successfully do that. So since I graduated with 2 bachelor's degrees here and a master's degree, and since then, I've done a lot of different types of work. Like fresh after graduating with my master's, I got hired by South Seattle College as a faculty member and a case manager. And the faculty job was teaching life skills at local DOC field offices to people who were on probation and were transitioning back into society. Or some of them may not have been in prison, but they were still on DOC and had to go report to the office and take our classes and things of that nature. And it was really rewarding work for me, you know, the fact that I got to tap into my lived experience as someone who was formerly incarcerated, and I was basically recruited to do this work at a local community college. I've also been a faculty member at 3 other colleges, Tacoma Community College, here at the University of Washington, Tacoma, and I'm currently an adjunct at the University of Puget Sound. And who would have ever thought that someone who was lucky to earn their GED could become an educator at 4 different colleges, including 2 universities. Like, I never thought that this would be possible. I never thought it would be in the cards for me. And to be honest, when it comes to goal setting and planning, I could have never mapped this journey out the way that it has played out. Like, it's been amazing. So when I tell the story sometimes, especially when I'm telling it real quick, like right now, it can seem like it was just so easy. You release from prison and you go to college and just everything is all good, right? But no, I experienced a lot of adversity during my time in college. Some of that was related to being formerly incarcerated. Some of it was not. You know, a lot of it was related to just being a black male. You know, there's a lot of different things that I had experienced. Some of it, a lot of my issues in college resulted from low self-esteem, low confidence that came from my K through 12 experience. When your teachers are constantly kicking you out of class, they make you feel like you don't belong. I felt like I was not very smart, like education had nothing to offer me. I thought that basically there was no reason to even attend school. And college changed that for me. So that damage from the K through 12 system, it had to be undone during my time in college. And once again, the way that happened was when I would get a good grade on a paper. I might pass a class. There might be some feedback from one of my teachers, and it was positive feedback that helped boost my confidence and self-esteem and helped me find my value and my worth with education. I had parenting-related issues. My kid's mom was my co-defendant. She went to prison as well, and our case played out really weird where I mentioned that I was looking at decades, right? And by the time I got sentenced, my release date was the next calendar year. The whole time that I'm going to court, do my time and get out, she's still going to court. Her case had not ended yet by the time I had already released from prison. I have never heard of this before with co-defendants. Like it was a blessing. It meant that the whole time I was locked up, my kids had their mom. When she went into prison, they had their dad. So even though they had one parent gone, they never had both of us gone at the same time. So I released from prison in June 2008. She went to prison in September 2008, and I started college September 2008. So I was pretty much a single parent, having to get my kids to daycare, having to go to class, pick them up, cook meals, and do all of this stuff while I'm trying to learn how to be a college student, while I'm trying to learn not to rely on crime to get by, you know? So a lot of parenting-related issues. You know, I had a child who was hospitalized with a kidney condition while I'm a student here, and that's really rough to be able to keep on pushing when your child is going through serious health things. During my time in college, my stepdad died, my mom died, my dad died, my sister died, had aunties die, uncles die, and every single time it was a devastating loss for me. These are the people who were the closest people in the world to me. I had never suffered close losses as a youngster, so it wasn't until I was an adult that I had to deal with this stuff for the first time. And I don't get to be that person who just gets to show up to the funeral. I had to help plan it, and nobody has money, so we have to figure out how are we gonna pay for this stuff. I've gone to several funerals since then. All of my loved ones I just named, they all got cremated. I noticed that most of the funerals I go to now, people are getting buried, you know? They're not having to get cremated the way my loved ones did. My mom died in California. Her ashes got flown back here. I didn't get to see, you know, send my mom off properly. So like that was very devastating for me. So the loss of my loved ones was a threat to my progress, right? I had every excuse, every reason to quit, but I didn't. I remember a time where I had a cancer scare. I had a lump on my neck, a tumor on my neck. Had to get it surgically removed in between winter and spring quarter and still just keep on pushing like nothing happened while I'm awaiting the test results from this tumor that they removed from my neck. And I also had to break my old habits. My family, a lot of my family members, my cousins, they did similar things to me, and I'm not the type of person who cuts family off like that. I know how to not get in the car with you if you head to certain places. I know we're not about to do the things we did before, but you're still my family, and I love you, and I don't want to just completely cut you off. Some people, they have to do that with certain family members in certain situations, but for me, family is like one of my top values. So breaking old habits when I'm going around cousins who have not broken those old habits can be really difficult, but it was something that I had to navigate. So I went through a lot of adversity during college. And these are things that our students face now in Husky Post-Prison Pathways. Everything that I'm mentioning, honestly, even before Husky Post-Prison Pathways officially launched as a program, as a faculty member here at UW-T, getting communications from my students on what they were going through, this stuff was not unique to me. You know, there's so many forms of adversity that college students face, and when your system impacted, it just adds on to that, right? Like you might not come from a family that has the resources to help you address these things, and you might feel alone and that you got no one to turn to, and you're dealing with the internalization of that and the stigma, so you don't even want to talk to people about what you might be going through sometimes. So this adversity, overcoming it was really rough. It's really like an unequal playing field. When you're formerly incarcerated, when you come from a background like what I just described to you guys, if this was a race, I'm starting way behind the starting line. And then I'm doing hurdles while other people just got a clear path. And once again, this is not unique to me. This is the plight of system-impacted students. So I just had an amazing experience through the Rockwood Institute, where 25 formerly incarcerated leaders were flown across the country on 3 different occasions for 5-day intensive leadership training. We went to Wisconsin, California, and New York, where we were focusing on these areas here: purpose, vision, partnership, resilience, performance, and personal ecology. Our focus on this was about being leaders who operate programs like Husky Post-Prison Pathways and things of that nature, right? But I realized that these are the same exact areas of focus that we have for our students who we're serving. This is the exact stuff that we want them to grow in. So Rockwood has some pretty interesting definitions for some of these things as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and share some of those. So purpose. That is, the definition Rockwood gives is to live and lead from that which gives our life meaning. As a leader in a program, as a staff member, It's great to have that purpose. It's almost mandatory that you should have that purpose. Otherwise, you're not going to do the best work, and you might not be the best person for that position. When it comes to our students, we want them to live their lives with purpose. We want them to set their goals, that will give their life meaning, not just chasing money, not chasing status or a title, but a life that they would actually want to live that has meaning for them. Vision, to create and articulate a clear and compelling picture of our desired future. Dr. Beasley just talked about the possible selves theory. It's no coincidence that we're focused on that, right? Because we're trying to get our students to create this vision for their lives. We want them to have a clear and compelling picture of who they can become in the future. Not just what they can become, but who they can become in a lot of different areas of their life. Partnership, to build and maintain strong interdependent relationships that advance our vision. Once again, mandatory for leaders, staff, and programs, but this is exactly what we want for our students. We want our students to build relationships that are meaningful, that have depth to them, where referrals can be made, introductions can be made, because a lot of the time, we know when it comes to getting jobs after graduation, sometimes it ain't about what you know, it's about who you know. And honestly, it shouldn't be that way, but that's how it is. So if you have connections, you have a way better chance of landing a meaningful career. Resilience. This was a big one for me. I always thought of resilience as, look, everyone in this room is resilient because you're here today. You guys have all survived a lot of different things. You were able to go through adversity and hardship and push through, and you're resilient because of that. But the way Rockwood defines resilience is to shift from reactivity to a state of resourcefulness in moments of stress and crisis. I personally had never heard it framed that way before. Maybe you guys have. I know sometimes I'm a little bit behind when it comes to picking up on things, but for me, this definition is not just about the fact that you persevered or that you pushed through. It's about the fact that you can make the hardship or the adversity that you're going through go away by shifting to resourcefulness rather than just reacting as things go along. So this was huge for me and a lot of people in our group when we saw the reframing of this word resilience. And then performance, to enhance our capacity to produce results that further our vision. Once again, exactly what we're trying to do for our students through Husky Post-Prison Pathways. Oh wait, and the last one, personal ecology. We don't want anyone burning out, right? We want to maintain balance, pacing, and efficiency to sustain our energy. And the way Husky Post-Prison Pathways supports our students in doing this is through the possible selves theory. The fact that it's built into what we're doing with them from the very first interaction. Helping them take a look at their life in different realms, such as health, relationships, looking at their life in the realms of career and academics, and exploring who they want to become in each one of those areas. We have a cohort experience where we're able to get a group of students together who will go through a shared experience and grow and develop, not alone, but as a group. We're introducing personal and professional development opportunities, things like mentorship. We're going to be doing a lot of different career fairs and things of that nature. We haven't quite done that. We just launched in September. We haven't been here for a long time yet. We got a lot of great plans and a lot of things that are already in motion. Another thing that we're doing is navigating resource. Honestly, a lot of the stuff that Danny explained, we're trying to mimic these guys. They've been doing it for a lot longer than us. And one of the things that I've been doing, traveling the country, doing site visits with folks, learning from people who have been doing the work much longer than me, learning from their mistakes, learning from the things that they've done well. And there's so many programs across the country that are doing great things, from coast to coast. So I think I went a little longer than I wanted to. Oh, this was the wrong one. It didn't have your QR code. So we want you guys to buy Grant's book. And this is a book launch event. This was supposed to have a picture of the book cover and a QR code. What I would want you guys to do, Google it. There's an ebook version, there's a paperback version, there's a hardcover version. Each one of them has different price points, but let's support this man and his work. And that's all I got for you.
That is all of our fantastic speakers. So let's give them a hand again. That was wonderful. Wow. that's an impressive amount of experience and building and dedication and sweat and blood and tears, I guess, if you want to call it all that. I mean, it's all those things. And I wanted to bring that, together here today, so we could see the various facets of system-affected academic work and groups and what it looks like and how it's growing and how it's continuing to expand and take new shapes and will continue into the future. So this is a time for until roughly next 15 minutes or so for a question and answer. There is a microphone set up right there, a stand, or I can also just bring it to people too. This is Q&A for anybody in the panel that anybody would have questions for or wanted to or to talk about something. So I'll kind of open it up for question and answer. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Omari. I appreciate that. Yep. See you. Yeah. Thank you.
How you doing?
Good.
My name's Carl, and I've come down, and I was listening to everybody, and I just heard a lot of parallels. I did time here in Washington, and I got my degree from Walla Walla while I was down, my AA in General Studies. The Sunshine Lady Foundation did the grants for those at that time.
Congratulations.
And then when I got out, I went to Edmonds Community College, got my paralegal degree, and you hear the struggles, and we all have them. You go to college, and they want to know everything about what's happening. You can't do this, you can't do that, and you continue through that. And something that I didn't hear through almost everybody's presentation except for Omari's is collateral consequences.
Yeah.
You guys don't use that term much, which I thought was interesting. Like you use marginalization, and I think that's almost like for it, you would think. So collateral consequences, we deal with that a lot. Everybody deals with it, I guess you could say, that is justice impacted. And so do you guys stay away from that term, or, and this goes for you in the book, with the book, and also kind of liked your presentation, and yours as well. So that's kind of part of my question. And one other thing is, how do you deal with other employers who don't want to let you in? Because I'm dealing with that now.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Anybody in the panel want to speak to that?
Well, I definitely use collateral consequences. I don't 100% agree with the terms. I don't believe they're collateral. I believe they're intentional, right? Collateral would suggest that it's just an accidental byproduct of whatever. I think it's definitely intentional. But I definitely use that term, right? So, I was talking about the idea that in my doctoral program, in one of the most liberal cities, in an institution that claims to be very liberal, would not provide full funding if you were formerly incarcerated, right? And so that meant that the formerly incarcerated students didn't get the same opportunities, right? They weren't on the fellowships, they weren't working on the research projects, they weren't graduating with publications, right? So even if they got the same degree, they weren't getting the same training or the same kind of support. So absolutely. And then, I think about, I've been on a reentry journey with my husband for 15 years, right? And so when I got a job, I had to sit in an office and explain that my husband wasn't going to murder everybody on the campus, because then it became oh, well, we don't want him to live, on campus housing. And then so we have to go to private landlords, and then they don't want you living there. And so you deal with them. And mind you, my husband's only felonies from 1997. So I finished my PhD in 2015, and it was hard to find a house to rent because of his conviction, which was a nonviolent drug crime. And so, absolutely, there's tons of collateral consequences, right? Getting him into a community college wasn't easy, even in New York City. There was still the question, have you been convicted of a crime, right? And so, there's absolutely tons of collateral consequences. And I write, my husband is not an academic, but he's written chapters about his life and all the collateral consequences, not just the ones we talk about, but how does the civil court system overlap with the criminal court system to kind of further punish you, right? In terms of getting custody of your children or getting visitation. And so I absolutely think collateral consequences. I don't know what the situation is here in Washington State, but one of the things we did in Kentucky, which is not a very friendly state for people who are formerly incarcerated, to put it nicely, is we advocated for a state bonding program. So a program that would allow the state to basically protect the employer. And then we developed training programs. And so, for example, Kentucky's horse country. And so you can get a really good job if you know how to take care of horses, right? And so they started a program where people who were currently incarcerated would go train horses and learn all of it before they were released. We advocated for a justice to journeyman program where people became, they received training on the inside in a whole host of high quality manufacturing, so not like warehouse jobs, right? It's like becoming a welder, right? Becoming a licensed carpenter. And then they would automatically get their apprenticeship upon release. So you do the program inside, and then you become someone's apprentice, which is what you need a few years in order to get the journeyman certification. So I would say that a lot of it is advocating at the state level for things that will make employers more willing to hire people. And it's not an easy process. I won't say I have a magic solution, but I think my husband actually developed a program in Kentucky with Goodwill Industries. And so he created videos to help them convince people to be second chance employers. And so, and then he would speak around the country for them, like, hey, I'm formerly incarcerated. I now run this shop. We hire formerly incarcerated. Everything's okay, right? No one's getting shanked in the warehouse, right? Like, everything's fine here. And I think doing work like that is how we begin to change people's minds, right? And I think it's a long process, right? We're still fighting in academia to get us in the door, right? And so that's, I think, the best advice I could give.
I guess I didn't use the word collateral consequence in my presentation, but I think underground scholars is a response to those collateral consequences, or maybe intentional consequences, right? So, a lot of the work that we've done, we've advocated, we're the first campus to remove the box for employment at Berkeley in the UC, right? And that came through our advocacy. We also, changed that law regarding probation and parole transfers, right? So we understand that there are consequences. We've advocated for fair housing in California. It started off with in Alameda County, which is where Berkeley is situated. We have a fair housing ordinance for formerly incarcerated people where you can't get discriminated by private and public housing, right? So we do maybe not use the word, but our actions are to dismantle those consequences.
I just wanted to pile on that a little bit. Like, I don't necessarily use the word collateral consequences either. I guess nothing against anybody that does. I'm sure it has its role and purpose, but just like in how I move in life and sort of what I do, I'm just thinking about things as like challenges or barriers, and like how do we dismantle that? How do we help folks get around it? And so I guess I just sort of label it challenges or barriers because it's more dynamic in that way. Like if it's a consequence, it just exists, right? If it's a challenge or barrier, then there's a way around it. It can sort of be removed and stuff like that. So I just think about it in that way. And as far as like the job stuff, I think like two-prong. I think like you used the ladder analogy earlier. I think when I like getting in and helping others get in, I use like a castle analogy. And it's like here's this sort of like wall, right? And here's this like ivory tower on the other side of that wall. And like I can throw this grappling hook up, and it's like this challenge, and I got to get over that barrier, and I get on the other side, and I have a choice. I can either like I can fight my way through the horde and go up to the ivory tower and sit up there, right? Or I can fight my way through the horde, get down to the gates, throw the gates open. I first throw the hook back over the other way, but get through there, like throw those gates open and help other people come through. So I think it's a responsibility of those of us who have gotten through to two-prong, like one, like make sure that we dismantle the barriers inside so that others can get through, but also like in doing the culture change, like that's part of the lesson I drew from the coming out movement is that like at first it was like lesbians that could be a little bit open because that was less of a threat, right? And then it was like white gay men that could be out because that was less of a threat than like black gay men, right? But I think it's a responsibility of like people who are at the most privileged, like wealthy white gay men could come out, and then like poor white gay men could come out, and then like black gay men could later come out and stuff. But it's a responsibility of those that are at sort of with some privilege to come out and start to change the systems. But anyway.
Yeah, and I'll just add that a lot of time the language that is used is going to be based on the circles that you find yourself in and what people often say. And then you might just find yourself in another circle where they're like, nah, we don't use that, and they have a completely different word. So I'm constantly learning new things. I think there's been one time so far that outside of just now where you mentioned intentional consequences that someone was like, no, this is not collateral. I don't even know what the definition of collateral is, but I've heard people use that term to fit, and it kind of fits what we go through when we have convictions, right? So I'm always open to new language and new ways of saying things. But another thing I'm realizing in 2025 is that it's constantly evolving, constantly changing, and it is really hard to keep up. So.
Other questions? I can speak a little bit on I guess, on collateral consequences, but in teaching, I've used the term to discuss the impact of consequences of the return to society for people that are formerly incarcerated. So from a text, somewhat of a textbook definition, I've given my students that concept, and I do write about it somewhat in some of my scholarship, but I also agree that the collateral is consequences is a very sanitized way to discuss the societal impacts that people encounter that are formerly incarcerated when we come back home, that are quite, as Jen stated, quite intentional, right? The system, it's not that the system's broken, the system is set up to work that way. It's working for just fine, right, to keep us excluded. And then in the regards to, I also align with what other people talked with in regards to, accessing employment. We work, for example, with the mentorship initiative through convict criminology. We work, we mentor some formerly incarcerated system-impacted students, professors, scholars in navigating the academic job market, for example. And even within that, just that small sphere of employment, there's multiple experiences based on the variation in stigmatization of different types of convictions, right? This country stigmatizes different types of, criminal convictions differently, of course, right? There's a spectrum of, for example, and I'm not aligning myself with that spectrum. I'm just saying that is social perceptions that do exist. There's a lot of variation there, and it's constantly evolving, especially as the employment terrain changes, the job terrain changes over time, and so on. And the spectrum of jobs that we have access to is increasing over time, and so we're winning the battle slowly. It's a battle. Back and forth. Sometimes there's some setbacks when new political, regimes step into power, right? And it makes it more difficult for us to access some of the areas that we used to have open, access to, and we get knocked back a couple steps. So that's a great question, and to say the answer, is that we're evolving and we're continuing to work on that, but that our progress is slowly improving. We do a lot of informal mentoring in convict criminology and in system-affected academic groups that you don't see even in a formal initiative that we developed, which these are powerful initiatives. We need these formal initiatives, but a lot of our mentorship is just resource sharing. We gather around our new members and pull them in, and some of the members that will meet at a conference, for example, or an event where we're at, and we'll just give us, we'll give you our number and we'll share our resources. And hey, I know this person, and if I don't know him, I know someone who does that can give you access to these things. So we share resources. A lot of the mentorship is informal. I was informally mentored for 10, 15 years as a young graduate student and as a new faculty member and so on by other formerly incarcerated and system-impacted people too. So that's another way and that way with that formal, resource sharing or informal resource sharing, we can kind of custom tailor our advice to each person's unique situation. Yeah. Yeah.
Do any presentations to human resource departments?
No, I don't know. Has anyone in this
Campus, or
Group?
is that a good idea to maybe start doing that?
I would say is. Yeah, that's definitely a good idea. We haven't done that work ourselves, but one thing that we were talking about with one of our partners who facilitates our career service program, for them to develop a toolkit to be able to do that, right? Not necessarily underground scholars doing it, but because they work with a lot of our populations and they work around career field stuff. That's something that we have discussed with them, was like for them to do a training or a toolkit for HRs and also for career centers at universities, because a lot of those career centers don't know how to deal with our population, right? They actually tell them, I'm on probation. Like, academic? No, probation, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important. I think let's touch base on the HR stuff. One thing we're piloting right now, like we have 10 hiring managers on campus going through like a 10-month curriculum. The Society for Human Resource Management has like a Getting Talent Back to Work certificate for HR folks that was developed like clearly with like community sort of like grounded stuff. And then we have hiring managers each month complete one module and then sort of come together in discussion. That has like some snippets of videos from folks, but as far as like that, building those relationships and building those stories, not so much like with that side of things, but let's connect on the.
Hi, everyone. This isn't so much a question, but just to kind of add to this conversation and lift it up a little. We did just pass a Fair Chance Employment Act here in Washington. It's actually one of the strongest in the country now. And so what it did is it made it, Chris, thank you to Chris who helped on that, but what it does is it makes it so that you can't do the background checks until after a conditional offer of employment. And then the businesses have to have a legitimate business reason to justify rescinding the offer at that point. And it'll be enforced by the Attorney General's office. So we'll be doing a lot more. Our organization, I was able to help lead on that. I'm also formerly incarcerated. I know several of you in here, but so it doesn't go into effect until July 2026. And then we had kind of a carve out for small employers, have another 6 months to come into compliance with it. So we're gonna be working closely with the Attorney General's office and hoping to do a lot of training for the businesses so they understand the new law. You know, it's not gonna be a magic bullet or anything like that, but the hope of it is that, you know, somebody gets that far and you get to know them, you know you want them to be on your team, and just to kind of humanize the person, is also also to reduce the trauma of having to retell your story, you know, 15, 20, 100 times. I've been on 1 million interviews, and it's very traumatic to have to relive your life, not to mention, you know, a lot of times I was spending the last of my money on gas to get to an interview that I wasn't gonna be considered for, so hopefully that will bring some more hope here to Washington.
Thank you for sharing. And your organization is Civil Survival, right? So yeah, they're doing some amazing work here. Yes, Christopher, here you go. You bet.
Kind of just wanted to, well, one, my name is Christopher. I spent time incarcerated, and I work here at the UWT, so I know a lot of the folks in here, but particularly for you two, I want to, you know, commend you and thank you for coming and spending your time with us and the work that you do. A few questions came to mind just to add to the discussion, but I think I just want to come down to like, what is a challenge that you've experienced, you know, that you may have an example to share in the work that you do?
I feel like convict criminology's biggest issue is in my opinion, there's a lot of attempts to disrupt our work that's coming from the outside that somehow infiltrates into the inside at times. And so I'm sure Grant will agree with this, but sometimes I feel like certain people are there just to stop progress. Like their purpose in being a member is to stop progress. You know, and so there's always been a concern in convict criminology about our movement being co-opted, right? So people coming in who, you know, how far do you take system impacted, right? So there's been that fear, right? So I think that's our biggest challenge is people from the outside trying to dismantle what's happening, and the more public and kind of vocal we become, the more of a threat it seems to be. And so I definitely noticed since I got in charge, I'm very vocal and very like I feel like I'm the militant abolitionist in the group. And so I don't know if that quote was about me being too radical from your book. But yeah, so I think there's just a lot of attempts to like co-opt the movement, and it's not unique to us, right? You know, we've heard from our Cali folks some of the same thing, right? So whenever we become big enough and cool enough, or when you have money, then they want you to be a part of it. Someone comes in and tries to take it over. It's happened with organizations, even some of the ones Grant talks about in his book, where all of a sudden, you know, it was started by formerly incarcerated people, funded by formerly incarcerated people. It got a line item budget, and it's like, oh, well, now Dr. So-and-so, who's never spent a day inside, is in charge of this program. And it's like, wow, well, thank you for co-opting all of our work and now taking all the credit for it. And then it becomes a point where, you know, I was getting upset because, you know, formerly incarcerated people who, it's like, oh, well, that's our secretary. But our director makes $250,000, but he's not formerly incarcerated. But this is a program for formerly incarcerated folks. But the secretary makes $40,000, but it's all right, you know, because now we have a token formerly incarcerated person we can show off. And so I always worry about the attempts to co-opt. I think that's why we had such a big concern about becoming part of the American Society of Criminology, was how much control would we have over our own organization. So I mean, on top of everything else, I think that's, for me, one of the biggest problems I faced.
Okay. So far, as a program at UC Berkeley, we haven't encountered a lot of problems in terms of like our presence there. I feel that we're probably one of the campus that's probably feels the most welcome. We've had other campuses where, you know, they've been kind of limited to what they can do or how they can serve students. But that's not our campus, right? So, you know, trying to think of like what some of the challenges. I guess some of the challenges is, you know, we have a program with about 100 students, right? All with different, you know, personalities, issues, right? And sometimes, you know, not all of our students are checking in, right? And it's also hard to keep track of everyone. Right, and so making sure that you know our students are taking care of themselves is important to us, because you know we've dealt with a lot of how can I say, folks, you know, kind of going back to old habits, right? You know, probably too much pressure on campus, or just a lot of personal stuff going on, and then fall back into substance abuse issues. So that's one issue that we deal with, right? And we try to be present for students, right? Making sure connecting them with the resources that they need to kind of, you know, get back on track. But if folks are not coming in and checking in, we don't know, right? And so that's usually, you know, that's the challenge, right? That not everyone is coming into the space and kind of sharing with us what's going on. So we have to find out through other people, right? And kind of reach out to them. That's on a personal, you know, just most like with students, right? But as far as also dealing with disgruntled folks, right? Not everyone is, you know, we've had people attack our program that were part of our program and are upset because they didn't get the position that they thought they had coming, or, you know, unfortunately, you know, not all formerly incarcerated people come in with the community mindset, right? And some of them do come within their own agenda, and when that doesn't kind of go their way, we've had folks, you know, attack us on social media and, you know, trying to create new programs within the UC because they're going to do it better than us. So usually, you know, a lot of personal issues that we deal with, I mean, with our students.
So I had a question about, there's no easy way to ask this because it's too many thoughts in my head, but a lot to do with prison abolition, and also a lot of the work training programs that, like you were talking about earlier with the program in Kentucky, helping people learn how to train horses and stuff like that. I keep thinking about, during a lot of this discussion, the fires in California that took place last January, and how there was a lot of volunteer firefighters, which weren't really volunteer, but specifically from prisons, and that, like, there was a big discussion that came from that in my social circles about it's not a good thing because it's slave labor, but it is a good thing because it's providing job training. And then, like, what is the limits of that job training? Do those people actually get access to the jobs afterwards? And like, I guess my question is more like, how do we identify like when these programs are good and working and versus just being like a positive plateau where it helps some people but not really enough?
Well, I would say any program that was created without the voices of the formerly incarcerated in that planning is probably a bad program. And I'm just going to make that as a blanket statement because I think a big part of the problem is a lot of well-meaning people, even progressives, right, want to enact things because they feel like that's what's going to be the best thing, but they don't talk to the formerly incarcerated about what's going to be the best thing, right? So in Kentucky, we were able to pass the Justice to Journeyman Act before we were able to pass a state ID act. So Kentucky doesn't have DMVs, so there's no place to go to. You have to go to your county clerk in order to get a state ID. And the county clerks are not very nice to the formerly incarcerated when they show up and don't have the right paperwork. And then it's like, okay, well, he's a journeyman, but he doesn't have a state ID to fill out an I-9, right? Or like something else. And so if people who are formerly incarcerated were not at the table, I think when it was planned, that's a huge problem. So definitely say that. And as a prison abolitionist, we always walk the line, right? Am I just perpetuating the system or am I helping someone? Of course, prison abolition for me is the long-term goal, but I can't just say I'm not going to support anything in prison because there's still men and women locked in cages, right? And they still need things, and they need to know someone cares, right? So like I did a program inside the Louisville Metro Jail, one of the most deadliest jails in the country, right? People dying all the time. And I was there every single Friday with those men for 6 months. And I know that, like, it made a difference, you know, just to know that someone was coming who cared about where they were going the first night out, someone who cared if they relapsed in the first 48 hours, right? Connecting them with services. So it's like, am I going to the jail and asking their permission to be there? Absolutely. But if I'm able to help 5 people in that 6-month period, like, that's something, right? If I keep 5 people out, I am moving towards this abolitionist framework, right? Everybody I keep out is moving towards that vision. Now, I won't do anything that's like state function, like the state said I should do this, right? These are all things that I'm doing as a person based on my lived experience. And so I get it, right? As a prison abolitionist, sometimes it feels dirty to like work within the system. But at the same time, you have to recognize that we can't we're not going to close down all prisons tomorrow, right? And until we get there, we need to help the people that are still there. So I get it. It feels gross sometimes. We had a whole panel at ASC about this, about prison abolition and is it dirty to like do stuff in prison, right?
I mean, not the total answer, but I think maybe a starting place is like asking the question, like, would you be okay with your daughter, your niece, your nephew, your cousin in like X situation, right? I think maybe sometimes like folks don't necessarily sort of like ask that question, right? And so if your daughter were in this job training program, learning how to fight fires and putting their like life on the line, and not able to like actually get a job in that field, and maybe you can say, well, they get these other benefits and they can sort of like go into a different occupation. Would you want like somebody doing that or not, right? If your son were in this like this residential setting, and yes, like career, like training opportunities are needed, but the only training opportunities are like labor, and like not that everyone needs to go to college and have professional opportunities, but if your son were in like a residential setting and the only training and development opportunity was like menial like labor type stuff, would you be okay with that or not? But that's maybe like a starting place of the conversation, I think. But
I'm just gonna add real quick. If the program, as they mentioned, including the voices of formerly incarcerated people, but also if the program is not rooted in giving people, the tools and the skills to become self-autonomous, then you just created a program where you're going to control people. And that's where we come from, right? We want to give you the tools and the skills that you need to be able to become a self-autonomous person and make the best decision for yourself and give you all the information that you need to be able to make that decision, right? Because there are programs where they try to dictate your life and try to tell you how you operate. Like, we don't do that. We allow our students, give them the skills, the information that they need to be able to make their own decisions about what they want to do with their lives and their studies and their careers.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So that is concludes the question and answer session, and the rest of the time is the mingle and close session. So thanks everyone for joining us for this this discussion, and I wanted to, before we go, thank the people that sponsored this event, the Violence Prevention and Transformation Research Collaborative, and Dr. Eric Madfis, thank you for that. Greatly appreciate it. The School of Social Work and Criminal Justice and Dean Kiva Miller, the Office of the Chancellor, and Dr. Lang that what was here. Husky's Post-Prison Pathways, very grateful for that. And also the staff of these various sponsors and the staff of the University of Washington Tacoma that were here to help with this event and for help with planning and the immense amount of work it took to put it together. So really want to extend a hand to those people. So thank you. And thank you for the panel for joining me today. I consider you all my friends and also, my colleagues, and we're going to continue working on and continue building. We're not done with this, but we're not done by a long shot. Like Jen said, we're here and we're not going anywhere, right? So with that, I'll wrap this up, and you can mingle or discuss or stretch or run for your life or whatever it is you would like to do. But anyway, so thank you everyone for coming.